Welcome to Veritas. I'm Mel Fabregas, and I'm so glad you're joining us tonight for our season premiere, Season 7. And I'm delighted, really delighted to once again have my good friend Clif High. But this time, finally, after so many years of hiding behind the computer screen, he is with us, and you'll be able to see him right now. So, without further ado, I'd like to welcome my friend Clif High. Clif, welcome to Veritas.
Thank you very much, Mel, and congratulations on 7 years.
Oh, thank you very much, and it's such a pleasure. Last year we had you on the season premiere, and now we're doing it again. You've always been with us from day one. And first question I have for you, why are you uncovering your face now?
It no longer matters. The issue that I had was similar to the comic book part of superheroes, where they're always, trying to hide their identity under glasses and a bad hat, simply to protect the people around them. And with the situation with my family and stuff, and it's somewhat reduced now, so there's no longer any need for that paranoia. Plus, Igor has gotten a little bit over his paranoia, moved around a bunch, and he thinks that the people chasing him have lost sight of him. So we're good.
Well, I'm so glad. We have so much room to cover today. I like to jump into things because we have 2 hours of great information. First of all, this weather. This weather, people called it global warming. Now they're calling it global change. Extreme summers, extreme winters. We're breaking records in the winter. What's going on?
This is, from my opinion, a necessary side effect of the expansion of the planet. And it occurs because of several different phenomena that all contribute. So you can imagine that the sun is out there pumping out electricity at frequencies we're unaware of, and it goes zipping right through ourselves and through the planet, and it gets captured by the plasma ball that's in the middle of the Earth. It's not a chunk of iron, molten or not, spinning around. As this is occurring, we get a magnetic field effect as these particles come zipping through our magnetosphere. And we also get this charging effect at the upper levels of the atmosphere, both of which are not really discussed for the effects that they are. So the jet stream and stuff is shifted around by the sudden electrification of these outer layers of the ionosphere, where we're basically dealing with hydrogen and other ions that have been captured by our electrical magnetism. As the magnetism warps and changes, it's no longer spherical. We get a push down here, a rise up there. Plus, we've got all these bastards out there with HAARP that are heating up the atmosphere on the underside, trying to punch it up this way and do other things to it. So, of course, we have instability. The instability is within a self-correcting system. So whether they intended it to do this or not, it is my thought that the net effect will be that the system will correct itself by an ice age, because that is a level of finality of correction that the Earth has always been able to achieve balance in the past. With previous civilizations that may have gotten out of hand, it would every so often dump an ice age on you. And I think we're heading into that. In fact, we're into it already at the very early stage. And maybe 2017, 2018 will have just a really horrific year. And I think the global consciousness then will be, let's get moving. Something seriously is altered.
Is this something that we can predict? I mean, we can see ice core samples and look to the past. Can we actually predict this? Or is this something that we have created because of our human problems?
Boy, that's a complicated answer, and yes is the response. Yes, you can predict this because there are normal cycles, 100,000-year cycle for ice ages, or it's actually 102,000, I think it is maximum. There's a 68,000-year cycle, 64 million-year cycle, et cetera. And all these cycles, we're in a conjunction where a number of them are coinciding at the same time. But also, this is a function of consciousness, not so yes, humans are causing this, but not because we're driving our cars around. I actually don't think cars are a good thing because they're consuming our atmosphere at a horrific rate. Just as an aside, every time you're sitting there idling, for each minute, I believe it's the equivalent of you and 820 horses sucking air and producing carbon dioxide. And the sucking of the air is the nasty part because you're destroying oxygen that we might want to breathe in the future. But the issue is that consciousness is reacting to outward spread of thought from within consciousness. We know from mundane science experiments that were conducted ad hoc by people like Art Bell on Coast to Coast, that if you get enough people concentrating on something, you can achieve an effect. Now, you get a few million people concentrating and they can push a hurricane a few miles offshore, that sort of thing. Also, if you get enough people agitated and irritated and zapped by radiation, and you've got mind control going on, and you've got the money going bad and pressure from all sides on them, you're going to get people themselves to be at a very conscious level, jittery, anxious, and so on and so on. And these waves of that kind of consciousness spread out within the realm of consciousness, and we're getting that feedback. And so the system, as I say, is self-correcting. And it is no accident of the universe that you and I and everyone on the planet at the moment are the remnants of the third civilization of humans, and that the previous three civilizations were wiped out. Or they did not wipe themselves out in a subconscious reaction, because the subconscious doesn't exist as we've been told. But they did participate by getting to a stage like us, where we're just agitated beyond belief because of all the different kinds of pressures, and you cannot contain that. Just as humans are all psychic and we're antennae for the reception of psychic impression, mental activity, that kind of thing, we are also emanators of it. As you know, you walk into a room sometime, or you're sitting in a restaurant, and for whatever reason, all the people in the restaurant turn their heads, and you have no clue what's going on. And it can be the most unprepossessing or presenting kind of a fellow, and yet there's something that's, an animal magnetism about him, and you cannot help yourself. And it is this wave that goes through the whole consciousness of all of the people sitting there. And so you see this happening all the time. We just don't really give it the credence and the import that we should.
I think of, we've been told, history, 10,000 years. We really don't know that much of the his-story from before that. And I have a feeling, Clif, that we have eradicated ourselves, or maybe the planet, like a dog, it simply shakes its fleas off every so often, because maybe we evolve technologically more than spiritually, and it happens again and again and again. And I look at the Amazon. I look at the Amazon and the forest, and they keep cutting trees all the time, mostly our lungs. And then we have the oceans. We also breathe from that. And I have a feeling that this is unsustainable. If the planet continues to grow people-wise, and we continue using the resources at the pace that we are, how can we sustain living in the next 100 years?
Actually, I don't find that to be the problem. Truly, I don't. Humans are the most creative things around. The problem with humans and the appearance of unsustainability. First off, there is sustainability. Even if we thought of ourselves as the fleas on the dog, bear in mind, the dog can't shed all the fleas. Mm-hmm. All right. At some point, you always end up with like that 10% residual from which the next population grows. Right. And so we can be tenacious that way. But even if we don't think of ourselves as, polluting insects or vermin, we can think of ourselves as being extremely creative here, because previous civilizations have been able to achieve a great deal of global peace and longevity. Our issue is that at the moment we're reaching this crescendo, a threshold, and we've been oppressed in a way previous civilizations presumably were not. So it is my contention that if we didn't have the powers that be sitting on our necks all the time, didn't have the royals in existence, didn't have the churches in existence sucking all the creativity and life out of us, that creative explosion that should have accompanied population growth would have occurred, and we would have solutions for all of the problems we face en masse. The solutions would be competing with each other for which was best for that particular kind of a problem. Truly, none of the problems we have are insurmountable. There's just a lot of them. Why are there a lot of them? Because we haven't been allowed to address them. In this country, look what happens when there's a problem called Katrina, and you get a major U.S. population center that has been destroyed, and thousands of people show up with small boats to go help rescue. What happens? Government comes and sits on their neck, rather than saying, you guys are mature adults, don't come screaming to us if you get into problems, but have at it. That kind of thing. So, yeah, there's chaos and there's no control, and that's what freaks governments out. And we're at that point now where it is the control of the system, the stymied nature the constipated nature of our financial system that dominates everything else that causes these issues. Previous cultures were not dominated by finance the way we are. If you think about things like Genghis Khan, could he have accomplished what he wanted if he'd had to get debt to finance the conquering of the planet? I don't think so. He just went on out and they did it, and the wealth was an after effect of that. And that's the way wealth is, as opposed to debt. At the moment, we're all bound up in this debt-based system, and until it cracks and goes away, we have a very small number of individuals sitting on our necks at critical places, pinching off the life, if not sucking it out of you. And so when that goes, I'm been forecasting for years that because of the data sets that a renaissance is coming of an unparalleled, we can't even conceive of what's going to happen here because of the magnification that's going to occur because of network effect. In previous renaissance, we had only the crudest form of network effect. So taking a renaissance that occurred in either China near at the same time or Europe. In both cases, we had geniuses popping up with technical solutions, the spread of new ideas, but it was a really slow spread. There was no real juxtaposition and magnifying of what was going on. It took all these geniuses tremendous amounts of their energy and time just to get together to get the new ideas to spread among themselves. Here we're in a situation where we have the internet, and the potential for network effect magnifies everything. So this is why I knew Bitcoin was going to be a success when it was in the 40 and 50 cents. It was because it had achieved a significant network effect where people were passionate and they were going to do it regardless of the outcome, regardless of the potential for failure. These individuals were so committed that they were going to do it, and they magnified each other. So I'm not worried about our problems with the atmosphere, with the planet, with pollution, with radiation. Any of this is we can overcome all of these if we just get this debt-based monster off our back.
Well, I always say, to me, some of the four pillars of our problems are fiat money, oil, meaning that we don't have the ability to at least. We have so many brains out there creating new ways of creating renewable energy, over unity and so on. But somebody comes, either they're subverted or destroyed. We have alternative cures, and I discuss them all the time right now. They're not allowed to go out. And if they do, the person who came up with it goes to trial because we're not allowed to talk about cures here. And, those are some of the four pillars. What do you think? And wars, by the way.
Yeah, I agree. But you'll notice just the other day that the tide has turned because we're getting more and more articles, both scholarly and from within the mainstream, that war is not the panacea for economy. Duh. War is not good for the planet. And it's like, oh, now that mainstream is starting to say it, there's an agenda there. So they're going to back off the war agenda on their own, I think. However, the technological explosion that we have buried within all of these creative people in the maker community who are currently suppressed by lack of funding, active press against them, the tinge of the conspiracy theorist kind of thing, all of those individuals will just flourish like you wouldn't believe, again, once this system starts breaking down. And we're in that breakdown phase now. So, for instance, there's a guy on YouTube who's come up with this way of using the neodymium magnets out of hard drives with a couple of coils, and you can make a light bulb. Well, it's like, oh, well, this is great. Handmade coils. He did all of this work, and it's perpetual. It just sits there and glows and glows and glows. And, it was more of a trinket for him, or a toy, a demonstration kind of a piece in his idea about over unity free energy. But it's a perfect device for me. Why? Because I'm going to be mooring a sailboat, and by law, you've got to have a mooring light up there. And this way I don't have to screw out batteries or any of that. I'll just make it into a nice little casing, build one myself, and I have free energy being used on my boat to power necessary vital safety gear.
What about other applications that you can actually maximize and magnify that effect into maybe an engine and maybe a power supply?
Well, exactly so. And see, here's the first thing that came across my mind when I saw that was, I wonder what happened if you would try and do this in series, and what would happen if you tried to do it with a cross-current magnification. And it was like, well, I haven't even gotten to there yet, but so this stuff's happening all over. So for instance, we have a network effect that I've participated in. One of the things I did was I started investigating the nature of water. Water is really cool. It should not exist as a molecule at all. In fact, it does not exist. You can't ever find a water molecule, although we drink it all the time. If you were to sit down with a magnifying glass and try and zero in on a water molecule, you get to the point where all of a sudden the water disappears the way a forest would disappear, and you're looking at a tree, only instead of looking at a water molecule, you're looking at oxygen and hydrogen in a lattice structure between them that's very loose and very weak in some regards. And so water does not really exist as we think of it. And that being the case, and the actual fluid nature of water is not within these molecules, but is within this energetic lattice that keeps them all bumpily and bubbly together and connected. So water does not exist as the individual atoms that we've been told with this hard bond carrying them all around. Rather, what water is all of these energetic particles pretending to be atoms sitting around exchanging energy with each other. So water is an energetic matrix. That being the case, it dawned on me at that point when I finally got into that understanding that, well, all of those people that are out there thinking that they can do things to water magnetically or with structure or with temperature, et cetera. I'm sorry?
H3O2?
No, because we're not getting quite there. But what's going on is a restructuring of water itself.
Restructuring, yeah.
Okay, and so it's still technically it's still H2O. You're not getting into any of the peroxides or any of that kind of thing. You still have just water, but what you do is you don't concentrate on the molecules. You care about the lattice of energy that's interconnecting them, and so you can change that lattice to be beneficial to you, beneficial to some project, and so on. So I started looking into the various different ways of doing this. Came across the work of a couple of geniuses that had worked in the 1920s and 1930s and 40s, one of whom was Victor Schauberger, right, who helped develop the engine for the Nazi Bell. Yeah. And his early work was all about structure of water. And so I started looking at his methods. In any event, long story, I built a device sitting on the other side of my computer here. This device is simple, crude, and so on, but it really works. It's quite effective. Very shocking because you put water through it and water expands. Literally, you pour a cup through, you get a cup plus about 4.5%. So it expands just in the process of going through. You can put it through a couple of times and get it to expand almost 9%, but it won't go any higher than that. Interesting. But also the water, when taken down to 39 degrees, just floods your body, and every cell in your body says, yay, give me more. Just an incredible experience. And so this little device is made out of a piece of PVC pipe with some glass marbles stuck in it in a particular way that I devised, and a couple of fittings on the end so I can get water through it from a hose connection. And this fellow I happen to know who is a genius with devices for the entertainment industry and works out of Las Vegas, your neck of the woods.
Steven Settlemeyer?
No.
Okay.
Jerry. I won't go into his last name because he's an interstellar kind of a guy. Okay. Hint there. Anyway, though, Jerry, he's mucking about with 3D printers. And so what's he decide to do but set up a program to do 3D printing of these devices so you don't have to have the rather crude method of putting all the glass marbles together. And he's using, so we've had this network effect of the two of us and others getting together to work about the issues of, the quality of the plastics or other materials involved, the cost, and so on. And so we get that magnification effect. I never would have been able to, with the limited time I've got, pursue a 3D printing solution. Yet here he is doing that. And his success may lead to an open source propagation of this 3D printing solution. And then there will be water modification people out there all over. And then somebody will take one of these devices and say, well, hey, we know that it makes it really good this way. What if we add that to it? And there off you go with that network effect. And so that'll come cycling back to me. And at some point, well, in fact, Jerry's already mailing me one of the devices he's printed out. So I've already gained from that network effect. And all I did was sit there and propagate out the information.
Interesting that last year I interviewed another Jerry, Dr. Jerry Pollack from the University of Washington, and we did a show on structured water. And another of our guests, Jeff Harvey, former Navy intelligence, he was exposed to radiation. He was almost dying. I didn't know this until it happened. But he went to the doctor, and the doctor said, you have about 2 days to live. So get your acts straight, your affairs in place, and say goodbye. Well, he heard one of my shows that I did with the one with Jerry Pollack, and Dr. Pollack said that he was working on testing with this new H3O2. It's not new, but it's what we find, I believe, in some of our vegetables and fruit. And they were testing it on people who were sick. And he immediately called them. And he had one last spot on the test, he sent the water and saved his life. So there's so much to this. What molecular change do you think you've accomplished in the water that you have created or changed?
Actually, what I believe has occurred from my level of microscopic examination and the physical examination of the water as it goes through in various different devices, including potentiometers, etc. I believe what's occurred is that instead of having simply a tetrahedral form of a lattice, we're now working more closely toward Buckminster Fuller's idea of interlinked comprehensive tetrahedrons. So in other words, you can think of the H2O molecule as basically a little tiny tetrahedral pyramid in terms of its lattice between itself, and they are at room temperature and under current conditions of being used water, so to speak, the lattice, the energy has fallen away from it, and so the tetrahedrons are not as interconnected as they should be. And you actually get a more fluid water, more penetration of the water if you were to use it for washing. If you use it for cooking, you get a marvelous set of effects from it. And I believe what's going on is that another layer of tetrahedrons has joined, or they're all interjoining at various layers, but also off of the point of the oxygen molecule. So basically what we're doing is we're magnifying the water effect. Instead of just having it at this level, we're also having it down here and then in a vertical or diagonal. What's interesting about this is they've recently given a prize to an Austrian fellow who came up with a way of doing this magnetically. No moving parts in his device. When they use his device to make beer, wine, bread, anything, you get an increase in production with volume with no increase in materials. The increase in production in bread is 12%. That's why he got the medal, was because the social medal in Austria, because basically he's given these guys 12% additional bread for no additional input of material. And in fact, it makes a better bread that lasts longer with far less spoilage by using his magnetically treated, newly structured water. Now, he is trying for the H3O2 approach, right? I believe, because of the ionic output that he gets. The structured water I'm dealing with is strictly using gravity and a Victor Schauberger natural effect kind of a thing to achieve a water more closely aligned with our biology for some biohacking I'm doing.
And, when I think of this, the bread, for example, I presume he's not using glyphosates.
Exactly.
Because glyphosate, as you know, is what, I went to Europe a couple of months ago, and I ate bread, I ate pasta every single day. I did not gain an ounce. I come back to the United States, I have a piece of bread next day, I'm 2 pounds heavier. What's up with that?
Well, it has to do with the actually at one level it has to do with the way the U.S. is growing the wheat for Roundup and the inert ingredient loads that are being carried along with the wheat. So we have to imagine a level of matter that is classified as inert goes into our food products, and in each and every one of the cases of the products themselves, the add-ons, they have some justification. They use a particular product to dampen foaming in bread, and the product itself is inert. However, in some cases, by the time the products that you actually consume reach you, they have 4,000 of these inert ingredients that have been in the process of making that particular whatever it is. And it is the accumulation, the aggregation of all of these inert ingredients being carried along and dumped into you that causes the dysfunction that leads to the inability to deal with the wheat itself and in our particular society. So if you'll notice, in Italy and in France and Germany, they don't harvest wheat the way we do. Around here, we harvest it by getting it to a certain stage and then dumping all these chemicals on it to kill everything in sight so that we, quote, reduce the processing costs. They're happy to pick up the processing costs in Europe because they don't have this upfront load of capital and soil damaging chemicals that go on. Further, because we have the soil damaging chemicals and the reaction with all the salts we're putting into the environment, as well as all the pollution we've got here, our particular food sources, our food body has been polluted, and we're picking that up and taking it in with us. So we can see ourselves as energetic bodies We know that we don't really exist. We are, in fact, composed of energy that winks in and out of existence 22 trillion times a second. And when we do this and think of ourselves this way, we can think of our body in a slightly different fashion in terms of how we manage it. And it actually, if you think of your body as a machine, and that you had a machine that had a specific lifespan engineered into it, but had the capability, if you desired to with good maintenance and all of this kind of thing, to have that lifespan extended, we would have an entirely different approach to how we manage things. Because in the United States, our media is focused on the central idea that everyone is their body, then there are all kinds of things that are allowed that make no sense if you imagine yourself the other way as a doer occupying a machine, a biomachine that you use to get around to do the stuff that you do. This can be proven, by the way. We can actually prove you are not your body with these real simple little thought experiments. And once you start opening your mind up to the idea that you are not your body, then you look at your body a different way. And you kind of think to yourself, well, I might, when I thought I was my body, indulge in that donut because I got pleasure out of it. And there was a direct connection between my pleasure and the sweet sense that was hitting me, and the body and my understanding of myself. But if I think of myself as a doer in the body, then I realize that when the body's sense is receiving the sweetness, I don't have to be overloaded by that. I don't have to be overwhelmed by it. I don't have to be subsumed nor seduced by it. And so I can say to myself, that's sweetness. That's all. It doesn't dominate me. It doesn't rule me. I need not pursue more than one bite of that. I actually met this very entertaining philosopher once at an airport, and he said he'll have one drink of any kind of drink you've ever got, but he never drinks more than one drink in a day. And he had all these people in the hotel bar, or in the bar there. We were waiting, trying to get him to have another drink, and he, offering him these exotic things and willing to pay for all this stuff, and he just wouldn't do it. And he said, "You have to understand." He said, this was when I was in my 20s. And he was saying, I'm not my body. All I need is this level of experience, and then I can cogitate on that experience all day. I can recall it. I can think about it. I don't have to be subsumed by it nor seduced by it. And this guy actually understood what was going on. So if we think of ourselves as machines, biomachines that are being run by us, that are inhabiting our bodies, then it becomes obvious that we can care for our bodies the way that a person might care for their car. And you see examples of cars that get, millions of miles and the interior's pristine and so on because of the level of maintenance. And all it requires is a different understanding and thinking and about yourself. And really it's an issue of, if you understand that you have 7 minds, 3 of which are actually available to you, and you can use them in different ways by slotting them into position at different points, and you are not any of your minds, and you are separate from your minds, then the whole of reality becomes an entirely different kind of a puzzle to investigate. Because the nature or the purpose of reality is to teach us stuff, right? And actually the thing it needs to teach us, here's the whole purpose of life, by the way. Here it is in a nutshell, and you needn't look any further. And you can just do away with religions and so forth. The whole point of life is to teach you what to do and what not to do. So here we are, a perfect example of what not to do. In the United States, it's not advisable to have more than 1 bite of bread or wheat, a product of any kind, because it's unhealthy for our body machines. Mm-hmm. In other environments, that's not the case. If you want to let yourself go into the feeling part of your reality, into that sensation part of reality, in Europe, it's safer. It's just not as safe here. And so you can have these ideas about yourself. You don't have to think of yourself as a bulimic or as somebody who is a Crohn's disease victim, that kind of thing, right? All of these are simply conditions of our machinery because we've been inattentive in our maintenance. And there are other issues. We bring over stuff from past lives in order to force us into particular ways of understanding and learning. But the nature of the beast, so to speak, is that all it takes is a little bit of shift of your brain to understand that you've got these 3 minds, one of which is your body mind, which is feeling, that accommodates your 4 senses. And then you have a desire mind, which is the power behind willpower. And then you have a feeling mind, which is where you absorb impressions and sensations and emotions, and where you handle all of those. So if you find yourself in a situation where you're overwhelmed, you're sucked in, you're seduced, you're taken away by a sensation, you're in feeling mind. If you find yourself in a situation where you're in that restaurant, you're male, you're not quite dead, and there's a flash of, cleavage or legs or something, whatever it is that gets you, and your eyes jump over there, that's desire mind, okay, which is interconnected with feeling mind, and the two work together. And then there's body mind. And body mind is like your ordinary operating system. And you can tell yourself at any time, I have control. I'm not subsumed and seduced by that cleavage. That's desire mind. That's lust. I need not deal with that at the moment. I can get into body mind just like that, which takes me out of there. I'm immune to that. Same thing with feeling, etc. And so, again, it goes back to the idea of the, inert ingredients poisoning you and so forth. But you take those inert ingredients on because you get trapped and seduced into either desire mind or feeling mind or the combination of them. And you need to sometimes recognize when you're in those states, step back and say, oh, I don't have to do that.
And by the way, I'm so glad you're talking about this because I think I've come to a conclusion lately, Clif. I think that we grow up thinking that our DNA has a code that tells us how to behave, how long to live, and so on. And I think based on the work of somebody I interviewed recently, Dr. Ellen Langer, I don't know if you know who she is. She wrote the book Counterclockwise. In the 1970s, she gathered a group of elderlies, people in their 70s and 80s, and put them at a location that was reminiscent to the 1950s for 1 week only. The newspapers that were given to them every day were from the 1950s. The food, the decoration, everything, TV programs, everything was 1950s. They determined their vitals before the test started and after, and they found out that physically they took pictures. They look younger. Their hearing became better. Their eyesight became better. So imagine if 1 week has that effect, what we can do if on a societal basis we could do this for everybody for a year.
Everybody go back to the 50s.
Yeah.
No, that's a scary thought. That's also sort of a misunderstanding of what's going on. Here's our problem with our particular setup at the moment. Most people don't know what humans are. Okay, that includes all of our scientists, all of our doctors, the physicians that we have here on the Western world, especially. But now, since the Western world meme has penetrated India and China, a lot of their thinking is polluted as well. Most people don't understand what it is to be human. You ask anybody, well, how many senses do we have? Well, they'll say 5 or 6 or whatever, right? Which is not true. We only have 4 senses. This is true of all vertebrate. The vertebrates are about 15% of the population of life on this earth. We are an intrusion into this sphere by some other entity at some point. If you want to call it, what do the Christian guys call it? Intelligent design. Okay. Mm-hmm. Sure. Intelligent design is accurate, but it was by these aquatic beings that came from a planet near Sirius. And they crafted us. And prior to that, there was just invertebrate life on this planet. All of this is relatively immaterial because humanity is only using that as a human. We only use our bodies as a template. That is all our DNA is. Most of our, for instance, most of our sciences relative to what it is to be a human are not sciences at all. So psychology and psychiatry cannot define for you consciousness, nor can they define the psyche. That it would be akin to a nuclear scientist not being able to define an atom or radiation. Would you trust such a being to do anything? No. If you had a nuclear scientist who couldn't define atoms or couldn't define radiation, then they are basically a witch doctor casting around for repeatable results with any kind of spell they can come up with. That's my opinion of psychology and psychiatry today, because they cannot define humans at any level. They think there's such a thing as a subconscious. They have sliced and diced and created all of these words for objects that do not exist. They live in a fantasy. Humans are relatively straightforward. And we can also, by the way, dispense not only with the psychiatrists and the psychologists, but with all religions. Any religion that cannot quickly and in under 35 words define for you what a soul is basically witchcraft. They're trying to mind control and so on. And any religion that could define soul would not be a religion. Because once you understand what your soul is, you realize it can be lost to you, but it can never, ever be saved. The concept of saving your soul is rather absurd. Let me see. The way to define a soul, by the way, it's you can look at it in one sense. It's your ticket to reincarnation as a human. And so you could lose it and not be able to reincarnate as a human, or would reincarnate as a damaged human that went down a stream of damage until they became no longer able to reincarnate as a human at all. And so your soul is that ticket. The soul doesn't exist as a solid object. It doesn't exist in the realm of matter, but it is with the you part of you in all of your reincarnations. And it actually is, in another way of thinking of it, the template through which matter expresses itself as your body. Okay, in all of its ramifications, its astral body, its energy body, the physical body, etc. So your soul is the mold form that's put on the extrusion machine through which matter is extruded into the body that you inhabit. And obviously, if you had no soul, you couldn't create the body, which and therefore wouldn't have anything to inhabit. So the soul is somewhat of value to you, but it can't be sold to anybody, traded, given, in any way bartered away from you, but it can be depreciated by bad behavior in the university of life that is Earth. If you continue in bad behavior long enough through enough lives, universe is self-correcting and it will say, I don't like this anymore. You ain't going anywhere that you need to go. You've abandoned the idea of eternal progression, not evolution, but eternal progression at an individual level. And therefore, I'm casting you off and busting up your parts into all these elemental beings. Now, you have to understand, let me get a sip of water here.
Well, you take the water. Where does consciousness reside?
Consciousness is everywhere. Everything is conscious.
Your consciousness and mine, are we linked?
Not as you're implying, no. Consciousness, my doer in my body is awake and conscious of being itself. So it has these 7 minds. Let me go back to that real quick. It has the body mind, the body brain mind you can think of. It has the desire mind. It has the feeling mind. It has a rightness mind that knows right from wrong, but only tells you so by saying, no, don't do that. In other words, your conscience, what we call our conscience. It has a reason mind that can do reasoning, but it never really contacts the body mind. It works differently. But then there's these last 2 minds, and they're the key. It has a mind for I-ness. So I know I am me separate from every other doer on this planet. And it has a mind for selfness. I know myself to be myself. Strange kind of words to think of, but you can perform a real quick little thought experiment here to prove to yourself that you have all of these minds, and it's relatively easy to do so. Plus, it also tells you that you are an eternal being. It's a nice little thought experiment. So let's make sure that no one ever tries to watch this or listen to this while they're driving, right, because it might be somewhat hypnotic to do this thought experiment. Okay, but here it is, real easy. So Mel, think about a definitive memory you had between age 10 and 11. Don't tell me about it, but just fix on that particular memory. It can be an accident, a happy vacation. We only want a little tiny incident, okay, that you know occurred during those ages. Then think about the earliest memory you have before that period of yourself in your body. What is your earliest memory of your body? Most people will be able to tell you well, I can remember I was 4 years old and I discovered stairs. And that was my first memory of me in my body because I slapped my feet on those stairs. And thereafter, I've been in my body ever since. Okay. So I'm sure you have those 2 memories. You have a memory of yourself at age 10 or 11 experiencing something that you have a vivid memory of that just grabbed you. And then do you have a memory that goes way back that you can tell me that, yes, you have a memory and I was about such and such an age?
The memory that I could go back in time was watching the TV at 6 o'clock in the morning and the American anthem coming in, and I'm pretending to be an orchestra maestro.
And how old were you?
I probably was about 4, maybe a little bit earlier.
There's a great contention, a postulate. Okay, it is postulated that humans don't go into their bodies until they're about 7 or 8. Some of us get in about 3 or 4 or 5. I know myself to have had a memory that I can fix in time, and it was my first memory of myself in my body, and I was about 3.5 years old. So I know that I was not in my body prior to that. I have no memory of myself in my body at that up to that point. Now, here's the other real shocking part of that memory. Okay, of this thought experiment. Think of yourself waving your arms as that maestro. You feel your I-ness and your selfness of that individual at that age still residing in you, do you not?
I do, and I've never seen a maestro before that. That's the weird thing.
Okay, now don't think about the actions. Think about yourself and how you felt at that time. Okay, then project yourself forward to that memory when you were 10 or 11. Okay, feel yourself then. Now, feel yourself at this instant. Is there any age difference between any of those?
No.
There you go. You're an eternal being that lives in a body that if you mishandle it, degrades. But could, if we knew what the hell we were doing, not degrade.
So why is it then that society tells us that time is linear from A to Z? We're born, we die, when everything could be happening. I mean, like the movie Interstellar. It could be happening all at the same time.
It actually does not happen all at the same time. That's another misnomer. Or misunderstanding. People do not grasp what time is and the concept of this eternal progression of humans. It goes to the Interstellar. It's like, it doesn't happen all at once that way. The idea being spread is reduced. It's a remnant of a very old teaching. And here's what basically happened. In the third civilization of humanity, the one that was wiped out, where we see the glazed miles of green, slightly radioactive glass just below the surface in India and in Africa, where there was some kind of a ray gun or whatever that took them out, that we think of as the Atlantean kind of civilization, right? The previous civilization had a body of knowledge that has come down to us through these deliberately chosen word here, fucktards, that are now categorized as priests. Okay. These priests also include what we now think of as academic scientists. It is not in their interest to provide truth or exploration for truth. It is in their interest, because they're bound up in an economic system that supports that interest, to only stay the narrow course and not think outside the box. This is very convenient for them, because the vast majority, over 90% of them, fall within a category of themselves not grasping that they are not their bodies. So they are trapped by their own thinking, can't think outside of themselves as their bodies, think that they die when their body dies, and all of these other follow-on aspects of that bind their thinking and trap them in a particular kind of destiny, which they have no recourse but which to propagate. They cannot see outside of their non-sight. So, for instance, all of the doctors you approach, if you ask your physician next time, doc, double check me on this. How many senses do we have?
I don't go to the doctor anymore.
I don't go to doctors either. But you see my point. The doctor will tell you we have 5 senses, right? Because he doesn't realize that the senses are discrete subsystems. So you have 2 eyes, 2 nostrils, 2 taste sequence groupings, arrays within your taste buds, and 2 ears. But each of these pairs form a being that is put at your disposal in this body for this life. So it's very much like the webcam we're using at the moment. The webcam provides all of the imagery and just dumps the imagery into the computer. The computer doesn't have to know about lighting or focus or any of this crap. It just has to take the image and pass it on. So our bodies are like the computer in that sense. And our eyes are like the webcam. Our eyes are conscious. They do a lot more than simply pass light through them. Again, here's a simple thought experiment. They say, if anyone tells you have 5 senses, you can say that's bullshit and I can prove it very easily. The reason that we can prove this is by like sets. So there's one category that all your senses have that none of the rest of your body has. And it discretely identifies your senses uniquely. none of them feel. Do you feel light going into your eyes? No. Do you feel smell, the contact that the smell gives you? No. You receive it as an impression. Do you feel the molecules hitting the taste buds that then trigger the individual taste? No, you receive it as an aggregate. Same thing of the sound coming in from your ears. You don't have to decode the vibrations and convert it into sound. You don't have to be aware of all of this. These are discrete subsystems that are conscious in and of themselves, but not conscious as themselves. And so they are subsystems that work for your body. And they are all resident in the head. In all vertebrates, that's the case it is. Now, there are some vertebrates that have more senses than us, those that live in the water and those that live in the air. They need them.
But you see, society tells us that nutrition starts in the mouth. I say nutrition starts in every sense, maybe more than the five senses that we supposedly have. Here, what you hear is nutrition. What you see is nutrition. That is nourishing your body and your brain. But let me go back to a moment to what you said regarding the priests in the past, or priestesses in the past. Now they're the academics with the titles after their names, PhDs and so on. Are they the same before we had these priests, and the pupils of today were the people that went to mystery schools and through initiation were the ones obtaining the knowledge? And now with the PhD system is the new student, if you will. Is that the transformation that we saw before? And now once you become part of the fold, these people with PhD, you're back to where we need you to be, and you don't step outside that box because we take away your tenure, we take away your grants and your financial resources.
Exactly so. And you have no right to life, basically, when you step outside of those that are nurturing you. But there's one kind of a misunderstanding that I want to clear up. It's not my opinion that the mystery schools knew shit. Okay. The mystery schools that predate our society, that our social order, are the remnants of that previous civilization, who were crawling out of the destruction of that civilization, had some small level of knowledge, but not enough to have a complete knowledge set, and therefore did not pass it on. What they had was knowledge up to a certain point, and then, oops, mystery occurred here, so we got to have a mystery school to support all of this, because we don't really know what that little missing piece is in order to get at this other thing. And oh, by the way, we can never really achieve this other thing because somehow we're inadequate to pierce this veil of the mystery to get to that thing. Well, it's because the mystery school had a big hard stop because it was a degraded remnant of a larger teaching. And so it'll never lead anywhere. It only takes you so far, and that's as far as it can ever go. So the idea that we should be emulating the Masons or the Egyptians or crawling around in the pyramids trying to find out what the results of these, what the origin of these mystery schools were is bullshit. Absolute crap. If you want to know about the previous order of our civilization, we have uncovered it recently in a giant library of huge books called Göbekli Tepe.
In Turkey.
Exactly so. And if you look at each one of those statuettes there, or statues, you'll find that they present at least 6 aspects of a particular story. And so you can see the entire progression of the first 3 civilizations in that statuary library, which was deliberately buried in order to protect it from incoming space crap at the end of that last 3rd civilization. And here we've got people digging it up and thinking that, oh, well, it was a theme park or something. No, not quite, guys. This was like a super university open to everybody, and you didn't have to have a mystery school understanding to grasp what it's telling you, because it describes the Nummo creating the templates for our bodies and doing us a great favor. You have to understand here that we are eternal beings, but our immortality, our eternal nature, does not exist independent in this materium of our soul, which allows us to create our bodies. And the Nummos came along and took the various different subsystems and decided to craft vertebra and the vertebrata kingdom. And then out of that, they were crafting us, deliberately attempting to create a being that could go through the rigors that are required of merging their material body and mind with the non-material energetic forms that are the soul and consciousness to form this eternal being. So in other words, the Nummo weren't just fucking around. The Nummo were trying, they weren't like playing with model ships and toys. They were building the real thing. They were trying to build a spiritually progressive being, a being capable of stepping on the same path as them in this idea of eternal progression. And that's at an individual level. So yes, we're all connected. And when you have an enlightenment experience, you're in fact channeling, if you will, funneling this light of intelligence that comes through this reason part of your mind that has no words and dumps all this stuff into you. And you can actually, if you get into these kind of states, reach back and grasp the same kind of understanding that the Nommo were after when they were shooting for us. These are not like Monsanto, okay? These are not beings that were trying to create a new kind of wheat. These are beings that came along and recognized the subset of the eye for what it is, the subset of the ears, the senses, knew how to put the senses together, knew how to create a feeling body, knew how to have that body evolve to meet the needs and stabilize for the progression of the consciousness of the doer, the self-aware consciousness that would then be able to direct it. So they were deliberately building vehicles for us. So it is a truism to say that there is as much difference between the soul of a human being and the soul of our next closest relatives materially, the great primates. There's as much difference between those as there is between our soul and the next level of souls above us, which are the Nommo. Okay. And there's as much difference between their souls and that level of intelligence above them as there is between us and that greater level of intelligence, what we would think of as supreme intelligence or God. Okay. But it's all on a progression, that we are all on at an individual level, and it gets really complicated. I mean, beyond our ability to really articulate well without hours and hours of defining of terms. But we know that the remnants of the society, of the social order that came through the mystery schools and now into academia is short-sighted, has no ability to define reality as we understand it. They feel trapped as beings of body, don't understand their ability, that their real nature, and as a result of which promulgate an artificial view of reality. And that artificial view of reality, as we see, is very easily manipulated by others who know more of it. You know, I'm convinced that the Masons know more of it. The bankers know more of it. They probably don't know a lot more, but they know enough to manipulate the system to their ends, because you see them using all the symbols and stuff to trigger all these particular kinds of effects. But once you get to a certain level of understanding, you're immune to the symbols and you can pick them out and say, oh, hey, I see what you're trying to do there. Don't.
But I think you use a key word here, burial. I think this has been historically known as the way to divide and conquer. For example, 1993, I went to Mexico City and I was at the cathedral. I went outside and I saw a big tarp. I tell this story all the time. And it said, do not cross. So I went inside and I found that what they were having there were a bunch of archaeologists uncovering a Mayan temple under the cathedral. And I said to myself, I was a late bloomer when it comes to all this knowledge. So I said, who would build a cathedral on top of it and why? And then I started looking into this and I found out that this is happening around the world. The Library of Alexandria, burying the knowledge from the past. China, paying farmers to build on top of pyramids and make it to look like a mound, looks like a farm. So in the past, all these commonalities that we have, all these pyramids that happened probably more or less at the same time. They say that Christopher Columbus linked us around the world when, in fact, we have people coming here, the Vikings, the Chinese, and some others. So what happened to that unity that we had on this planet after this? Columbus came along, now we're linked, but before we were linked. Why? Why the disconnect?
I think it has to do with the nature of, again, getting back to the idea of consciousness and those people that are trapped into their bodies. Thinking that way. And so you get to the idea that the priests of the time, whether it was the power structure, has an inbuilt need to continue their power structure. So it's easier for them to control the peasants in China if the peasants in China don't think that the current power structure is but a remnant of a greater power. So if you see the current power structure has not a clue as to how to build the thing you're running your plow along next to every damn day, and they couldn't build it if they tried, then your respect for that current power structure is only as far as the bullet that they can throw at you.
Ego.
You have no inherent emotional loyalty to their whims and desires. You cannot be sold the idea that they have a divine right to rule. What is the divine right of the claimed by the Queen to rule when there was an incredible global grid of pyramids all around the planet 12,000 years before her previous ancestor got up and stumbled out of a cave, So it's like, no, royals don't exist per se. Why have any respect for them at all? Other than, if you need the theme park. But if you're going to do it that way.
Okay. Losing you? Okay. Can you hear me now? Okay.
Yeah.
I was
there we go.
Okay, go ahead.
In any event, though, so my point being that the great claim to divine right to rule, to elitism, extends only so far as they are able to say that they are at the pyramid of our civilization and we're the greatest civilization ever. If you have the idea that there's a greater anything beyond them that they don't control or funnel, then why bother with them, and their whole power structure crumbles. And then we get into the Renaissance and the new burst of creativity, the truly distributed humanity, and the chaos that will erupt. A lot of people are raised as authoritarians, can't see the usefulness of chaos, and are quite frightened of it. And so they will have a tendency to support the divine right to rulers, the elitists, but those numbers are being subsumed by the current population pressures as well as the planetary pressures on us. And we're going to get to that anyway. When we get to the greater depths of the planetary changes here in 2017 and 2018, there's going to be a very large earthquake and a volcano go off. We're having volcanoes go off now. We're having a lot of earthquakes now. But what's going to happen in the late 2017 or early 2018, maybe even to mid 2018, I don't have much in the way of precision on the date, is going to be something akin to Mount Rainier going in a giant tsunami headed towards Japan. Okay, the tsunami will probably inundate Puget Sound region, go into Alaska, travel down the coast, probably will miss California just because of the shape of the coast, but there will be a lot of damage from the ancillary earthquakes and major damage to any idea of national anything, road system, grids, that kind of deal, right? And so that if that occurs, we get to a situation where the power structure then becomes intensely local. Under those kind of circumstances, in a background of a world going into an ice age, you're going to find that the universe will separate humanity into two camps. A dwindling small camp that will try and cluster around a power authority on the assumption that the power authority can somehow make them safe. And then the others who realize that they are in a greater universe and are conscious in that universe and go on out to explore it as they need to.
Is the former Agenda 21?
The Agenda 21 presumes a view of the world that will not exist. So much of the planning and preparation that the powers that be are doing is for a range of environments. So you notice that Agenda 21 doesn't really juxtapose very well with the giant pyramid full of seeds in the cold in Norway, right? So the two are not really on the same page. They are.
Oops. I'm losing you there. Okay.
Still here, yeah.
I'm losing you there. Why don't we stop it now again, getting close to the half-an-hour mark, so that we can save the file, because maybe it's the connection or maybe it's because we're approaching a half-an-hour mark. You want to take a minute break?
Let's take a break, yeah.
Okay.
We have some kind of an internet connection issue here.
Yeah. All right. I'll call you right back.
Okay.
Okay. Before I forget, Ebola. Why did all of a sudden Did it disappear from the media? Were we being distracted with something else while this was happening?
That might be the case, but there's been no emotive blip that's occurred since then. In my original forecasts on the Ebola when it appeared was that, according to our data, that it would flare up like the fever that it was, but die down just as quickly. And that's very much the effect that we did indeed see. There's some thought in my mind that the powers that be have discovered that Ebola won't do what they want it to do. That there was such a huge level of response from the alternative media that once again they ran into this wall of not being able to promulgate their fear agenda and direct people the way that they wanted.
Or could it be, and I mean to interrupt you, I have
Sure.
family members in the airline industry, and I'm in the vacation industry as well, and I saw, and people that I know in many parts of the world, well, that was happening. They told me, we're getting a lot of cancellations. Could it
sure.
be that the powers that want to be realize, wait a second, this is going to affect us a lot economically, the stock market, and now we have Black Friday, Christmas, let's just stop it while we're ahead?
Yes, I think the timing was bad for them relative to that. But no matter what time of the year that they would unleash something on the pandemic-wise, you're going to get that effect on the tourist industry. So, but there's also that issue of what was their goal? And their goal may have been, I hate answering the why question because it goes to intent.
Right.
Most people are not really clear on their own intent. Many people within the power structure work on the intent of someone else and are not aware of that. They're simply following the agenda. They don't set the agenda. They largely don't even have a clue as to what that agenda feeds into. So it's you get into levels of speculation that usually are not meaningful. However, with Ebola, you could say to yourself, one thing that might have occurred was that it might have been a test. The same way I used to do tests.
I'm losing the connection.
Emotional response was.
Okay, so I'm losing your connection. Let's wait for a second. Okay, now go ahead.
Okay, so in my early days in 1994 and 95, I would put specific words into specific kinds of forum to see what the response was going to be. Yeah. And then I would categorize the emotional response in order to come up with the numbers that actually power the system today. And they may be doing, the powers that be may be doing something like that on a much grander scale. They may be doing testing the way that Facebook does testing with emotional seeding. Facebook has been testing a system that looks to be going the same direction as mine towards predictive linguistics with a captured data audience. I think that's their intent. Still there?
Oh, I'm still here.
Okay. So I think that's their intent on Facebook on doing the emotional quantification testing and qualification testing they're doing now.
Data mining, essentially.
No. They're doing a different thing entirely. They're trying to qualify and quantify human emotions, and be able to read them across the internet. We can't mine that now. If you can, as I do, you get a big insight into what's going on in the future. I think that that's what Facebook and others are trying to do. The predictive linguistics field is growing, but it's mostly growing behind the black ops side of things in a very very clandestine way. It's not really clandestine. It's more sub rosa, subtabular. It's just under the table. No one just really talks about it. There's these just departments in various different organizations that are doing things that they hire specialists in, and it's a weird little collection. And if you happen to follow who's working for whom, you find out they're hiring some strange combinations of linguists and parapsychologists and psychologists, etc. And not that I give much credence to psychologists, but they're trying to quantify emotions. We see these tests in Facebook. It may be that the powers that be are doing that on a grander scale with things like Ebola. They may not have gotten the reaction that they expected, or they may have gotten enough data, and so the test was shut down. And they may have learned something that, to their benefit or detriment, and have decided to go no further.
Wasn't that the same test? Well, beta test back in 2009 with the swine flu, and they bought billions of vaccines for the swine flu, and now they were trying to do it again and realized, again, we can't proceed because it's going to kill the economy.
I think they may have said we can't proceed, but I don't think the kill the economy component entered into it, because there's an economic incentive to pushing the vaccine approach on so many different levels. However, they cannot be seen to fail on a national vaccine by the populace even once, because thereafter the entire vaccine myth goes away. everyone has this understanding that vaccines cured polio, and nothing could be further from the truth. The polio disease was already dropping radically at the time the first vaccines were introduced, and the vaccines merely piggybacked on a natural effect and caused a number of problems themselves. So vaccines have never been a proven.
It was penicillin that brought the polio back.
Exactly. But regardless of any of the details involved there's a whole industry involved in vaccines that has the same problem that the Federal Reserve has. Lack of confidence kills our industry. The minute there's a hint that this whole thing is nothing more than a wild-ass theory that we can't prove anything of, it all goes away. So the minute we run into a successful resistance effort at a larger than individual level, we are doomed. That's why they try and crush these nurses and nursing organizations that refuse to get involved with vaccines around the flu season. Mm-hmm. And that's why they're so vehement about destroying these individuals' lives, because they need to basically crush them so horrifically that every other person who might want to follow that has any inclination is set as an example that, well, look what happened to so-and-so, Nurse Betty, over there, she hasn't been able to work, blah, 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 blah. And so we get into that same kind of a situation. And I think that there was this, real fear on the part of from some language that I've seen on the part of the, powers that be about the impact of of a rollout of an Ebola vaccine because of the potential for a mass wave of refuseniks that would have serious science behind them, and all kinds of people that were scientists that wouldn't take the thing, and so on. And it would crush the vaccine industry and bring it all into question. And so they may have stopped just for that. But I actually think it was more of a test.
Is there a correlation between, and I just thought about this, between this push for vaccination and the gun-grabbing agenda that, with, let's say, Sandy Hook, the Sandy Hook hoax, the Aurora, Colorado, you name it, all these
the
stage events.
Issues. Right,
is there a correlation between this and gun grabbing to probably implement something?
Sure. If we look, as we were discussing the potential range of activity, where does Agenda 21 fit in with the seed storage vault? Where do the gun-grabbing emotional trigger incidents, trigger used advisedly, where do they fit in with Agenda 21 and so on? You can't get Agenda 21 against an armed populace, so you've got to deal with that first. There's all these things on their particular critical path, getting them towards their particular goal, which is apparently a few of the very special elite 500,000 of us plebs that are mind controlled to the point that we're absolute slaves, and the planet as some kind of paradise for these, few tens of thousands of elite. And that's maybe their particular goal as they've described it. Now, I'm not particularly saddened to tell them.
Oops. Let's see. You still there? Okay, go ahead. Let's see. Your video is stopping. Let's give it a moment. Okay, proceed.
There we go. Yeah, so basically, the power elites are going to run into the hard smack of reality on so many different levels that we see the impact on a number of their systems. Chemtrails, HARP, all of the weather control stuff are setting up feedback loops of instability that have actually triggered universe into a as we say, shaking the fleas off the dog kind of a level of response to get back into balance, because it cannot allow the fleas to induce anemia into the system as a whole by sucking too much blood or causing too much problems in other ways. And so we'll find that previous episodes of humanity that may have had nuclear capability were buried and cleansed before the next civilization was allowed to rise. Now, I think we're in a very unique position at the moment in a way that had not necessarily existed in previous civilizations. And we may actually stand a chance of coming through intact because of actually as a weird side effect of the fact that we've been oppressed for the last 60, 80 years. And more than that, by these secret mystery schools, okay, and by them trying to direct everything, but being successful in the American century has led to a weird psychosocial history kind of juxtaposition where we're going to have a renaissance just as the social order is going to experience massive climate change and earth changes. So parts of those renaissance, parts of that creativity long suppressed that has just been, clawing to get out are going to be able to be focused in a way that would not have occurred had the Renaissance actually occurred in the 1920s when it was just burgeoning. We should have had an intellectual renaissance in the 1920s that was much superior to what we had and it lasted through to the 50s, but it was suppressed. It was marginalized and massaged and put out of business basically by the powers that be. The priest class in all of social order, religion, academia, money, everywhere, all cooperated to do away with this a different way of thinking renaissance that was occurring. And so we got stuck with the thinking we've had the last few decades. And as a result of which we've been oppressed and suppressed, but that wave has never gone away. In fact, I think by bottling it up, it's now under pressure. And we're seeing that come out in the maker movement, 3D printing, people coming up with individual free energy devices. All of this kind of stuff is all going to cooperate to network effect and piggyback off each other and force magnify off of each other.
Oops. Let's see. I'm losing you there. Okay.
Still there?
Now, sometimes there's a little pause. I guess bandwidth gets clogged, but go ahead.
Anyway, so the point being that we might not have stood the good chance I think we have now if we'd had our Renaissance in the 20s, because a lot of that creativity would have been used up, so to speak, and dissipated the way that there is the natural wave of such things within the social order. And so it's actually a good time for us to have this renaissance because we're going to be hit by so many problems that are beyond the ability of the powers that be to even conceptualize, let alone figure out how to fit into their particular weird, twisted agenda. You got to figure it this way. You got priests that are pedophiles. They're not thinking about saving you. They're thinking about something else. You got a royal family that's pedophilic to the point that they make money off of it. They're not thinking about your welfare. Their 11 brain channels are all used up doing something else. So these people, as, quote, leaders, cannot see beyond the limit of their nose, mostly. And this will become very evident as we run into these crises. And what's going to happen in a broad scale, and some of this is in the report that I've been writing that'll be released tomorrow, because that's a lot of long-term values in there. But what's going to basically happen is we're going to run into a situation where the crises are going to meet the immovable wall of the autocratic bureaucracy, and the autocratic bureaucracy is simply going to be overwhelmed and crumble. And there will be individual chunks of that wall that will try and survive and make do on their own and try to reconstitute the wall as a whole. But that structure is gone once its integrity is ruptured.
Let me go back for a moment to data mining for a second.
Sure.
For the last couple of years, I've been talking about Common Core. And a lot of people say to me, oh, you're exaggerating. I'm like, really? I'm exaggerating.
No, you're not.
Look, from all places, Fox News came out with some news last week, and I was very surprised to see it from Fox News. But they were talking about what I've been saying for the last 2 years, that what they're trying to do is data mine the children. Let's say that a child is looking at a picture on a computer. First of all, they're going to be strapped with a little cable, which is going to be connected to a computer that's going to take their vital signs and their reaction. Let's say they see a gun. But that data mining is going to stay there forever in their record so that when they grow up to be, say, 18 or 21, they cannot get a gun. It's data mining to the nth degree.
Yeah, but you're wrong about it to the purpose, okay? You're almost there. So you've got that kid strapped in. He's got that thing, all of the vital signs being taken. They know how he's thinking about these various images. Take it up to Clockwork Orange.
Yeah.
What they're attempting to do is to then be able to come back on you, because look at this. Your soul allows your body to be created by the matter of the materium 22 trillion times a second, being expressed through that template into your body, into what we think of as solid. But there's two discrete systems within your body that are there that can be addressed. We call them the sympathetic and parasympathetic.
Right.
Okay. Or automatic and conscious control system, right? And so there is the conscious control system. You can blink your eyes, you can consciously direct your breath to a certain degree and so on. But all of these are also automatic systems. So there is a potential. This is the same technique used in yoga. Yoga, you attempt to control the body by controlling the automatic systems and using the junction of those, the breathing, the eyes, and all of these others that go through the senses to control the reaction of the body and therefore get control of your material being. Yoga, by the way, is a remnant system. It is not a complete understanding. There's as many holes in it as there is in psychology.
And it's Egyptian, not Indian, by the way.
Exactly. But in any event, it doesn't matter again, it's a remnant, non-complete system. It takes you so far and then that's it. But see what the powers that be are doing this. There's a juxtaposition of those systems that allow them to control your inappropriate or your automatic response by controlling your conscious response and vice versa. And once they figure out what the clue is to you individually, the data mining can go to the degree that a cop or a policy enforcement person in the future could pull up your identity on their phone and it could say, here are the following key trigger words. And they say, bamboozle, pineapple, Coca-Cola, and suddenly you find yourself squatting with your hands behind your head and peeing on yourself. And I mean, it can get to that level, not necessarily with those words, but see, they could pre-program you.
For pre-crime?
No, just to be able to control you. Okay. The whole issue is control. There are so few of the powers that be and so many of us that once control slips, they'll never get it back. The academics, the priest class in all of our social strata exist because they were able to climb out of the slime slightly ahead of everybody else as the remnant of that last civilization went down. They claim to have a certain level of knowledge. They've been able to propagate that claim through time by combination. The total combination of all of these different means, killing as many people as they could in the opposition, et cetera, mind controlling wherever they could. And now they're reaching the point where our ability to propagate as humans, to create new souls in this process of progressive or continual eternal progression and create more humans has overwhelmed their ability to control that rising populace. Because there's a certain level of diversity that creeps in, complexity and so on, and they're not prepared to handle it. So they're much better at controlling a small population.
Oops. Let's see if you come back. Okay, let's see. Hold on. All right, come back.
Still there?
Yep, I'm still here.
Okay, so basically they are using, in my opinion, the whole Common Core thing, the whole electronic connection is not transhumanism. They're not trying to go for that. They're trying to go for an in-depth analysis, if you will, not data mining, which is to mine for the aggregate of data out of vast quantities to try and get some meaning, but rather they're trying to find out the absolute nuance, the individual iota that tweak your particular response to a particular thing so that they can have that for later use.
But isn't there transhumanism already taking place? I mean, look at our children. Take their Xbox or their, PS2, 3, whatever. Take their phones. Immediately, that causes depression. Immediately, that the parents take into the psychologist, psychiatrist. They get into the fold when it comes to SSRIs, antidepressant medication. And we have this zombified society because of the technology and the merger of technology with humans.
I think that's actually a slight misunderstanding. Okay, because when I say transhumanism, I'm actually referring to the competing meme within our social order for the control, and that is the inclusion of actual devices within the physical body of the humans. There are problems with that from a mystery school level. You have to understand that's why it's not been implemented so far, is that they do understand the impact of the intrusion of these devices in humans because we've seen it with the alien implant issues. Okay, the Mill Labs. Still there?
Yeah. Is it really alien or is it us doing the implanting?
That's a real good question. The definition for the alien, it doesn't matter, actually. It doesn't matter. The implants against our will by forces that are inimical to our well-being, whether from this planet or not, when they did those implants and they did them in mass, there was a tracking study that was done within the military, several in fact. these tracking studies came to certain conclusions. Those conclusions have put the whole transhumanism agenda, thrown them for a loop. There was a bunch of people that were promulgating and were proponents for transhumanism. Well, it's easy, they say. We can control all these bastards. Just shoot them up with these chips and give me enough electricity and they're mine. But the actual injection of chips into people causes certain effects to occur and side effects that the transhumanists don't have a response for when it comes to the aggregate. And so just as an aside, okay, as one specific example of, and there's numbers of...
Oh, hold it. There's a number of, and
these side...
Hold on. You're getting caught there. Hold on. Just give it a second. Okay. As a consequence of transhumanism, you can proceed from there.
Okay. There are a number of side effects. One specific and they can't control the side effects. They don't know how to deal with them. They weren't prepared for them. One specific side effect of the inclusion of these devices is the disruption of the connection between the three internal bodies that go to form the human and the three minds that it has, such that some of these people were becoming aware, even though they were unaware of having been implanted in their conscious mind or memory. They became aware of a larger grasp of universe just by the pollution of that device within their body. And the powers that be weren't prepared for a certain subset of their implanted people to end up on the conspiracy theory side, to be burgeoning researchers, et cetera, et cetera. They weren't prepared for the creating their own opposition side effect of this. Yeah, but not whistleblowers so much. Very few of the guys with the implants really end up in that category. Okay. But there's a vast number of them that know that they've had the implants, that have had them taken out, can't explain them, and it puts them on this path of basically what the hell happened, and that it was just not good for the powers that be. And they recognized that even if you didn't have the implant in you, if you did not know you had been implanted, if you had absolutely no conscious memory of it, nonetheless, it would be discovered by you in your body, no matter where they put it, in some subset, and you would become aware of things that had been done to you. So they couldn't grasp that universe was making this a self-correcting issue.
Is it because our bodies are designed to reject foreign entities no matter what technology is in place?
You're thinking of body as matter, and it had nothing to do with that. It has to do with the fact that, well, look at it this way. Your body has exactly as much energy to move and shift around as a stone does, okay? The only thing that allows you to be active and function within what we think of as movement and reality is the consciousness within you as a doer moving the meat around, so to speak, okay? But the meat, the flesh, is only one of a number of bodies that the doer inhabits that are sort of like shelled. And we see the energetic body, the astral body. We can take measurements of your heartbeat coming out 60 feet if you're a real energetic kind of a person, as it distorts electrical waves, that kind of thing. That's the energy body, the radiant body. There's also this astral body that ties the template that is your soul, because 22 trillion times a second, universe is recreating your body so that you'll be able to move. Otherwise, you'd be locked in solidity.
Vibration-wise.
Correct.
Yeah.
So there's the pulse, 22 trillion times a second, that recreates all of universe, all of materium. And so for us to move within that, we need to have a conscious controller, like a video game controller, that allows us to move the critters in the video game. Well, that for our body is this astral body, what we call this astral body. It's neither energetic nor matter, and it binds the two. So if you put an energetic device within the human body or cause an energetic field to occur, you disrupt the connection of the astral body, which is your game controller. And so you get problems with your physical body, which normally lead you to seek out what the hell is happening. And you discover the implant they cut out and you're fine. That is actually what happened to me. I had one cut out of the back of my head here.
Did you?
Yes, on the back on this bone back behind my ear was this small little protrusion. And I just came to an understanding of that some months after I'd had an episode of missing time.
Wait a second. This is something you shared with me years ago, and I was wondering when you were going to release that to the public. Are you ready to say?
Sure. Yeah. Well, we'll discuss
All right, go ahead.
So in the early 70s, I had an episode of missing time, as did my wife, an hour and a half. And some months after that, I was in that state of wondering basically what was going on. My body was simply not functioning, which led to a number of doctor visits, which led to a surgery on my ankle where this thing was removed, and what they called a benign adenopathy. My body had encapsulated this a microscopic pebble-sized thing in various different material to try and stop it from interfering with it. And then there was one removed from the back of my head here that was on the bone. And that was the easy part. That was a little simple incision, doctor visit. And he pulls it out and said, "Oh, you must have been shot by a BB when you were a kid." I said, "Bullshit. If I'd been shot, I would have known." And as a matter of fact, nobody was shooting at me with BBs. It was always much higher caliber. So anyway, and we looked at it and looked at it under a microscope, and it was like a corroded gray, not copper. It wasn't, and that was something I pointed out to him. Copper is not good for the human body. It causes problems when it's injected and maintained in the human body. Can cause problems to wear a copper bracelet, for instance, right? So if I had, as a kid, had something that was copper, as BBs were at the time, shot in there and on that bone, I would have had all these kinds of problems for years. And as far as I knew, and he said, "Well, look, it's in here and there's no scar even. It is in there so long that the scar has gone away." And I said, "Doc, I've got a scar here on this finger from the 1960s when a dog tore a chain through my hand. It's never gone away. So why should we presume that a scar that was just a few years older would have gone away?" So no, something happened, and I don't know how that thing got in there, but A, it's no BB, and I want it out. Anyway, so they cut it out, but that led to my wondering, what's going on here, and expanding my view of things.
Did you measure it for radio frequencies, by the way?
No. I was ignorant. I was abysmally ignorant at the time. I was not even present in mind enough to be able to capture that thing and have it today in a jar. The doctor pitched it. I'm not even sure what happened, because I wasn't expecting to have to deal with the issue of being implanted when I wondered why in the hell I'm having this pain back here, right? It could, in my line of work, it could have been a bit of cedar sliver or who knows what, so I wasn't prepared for it at all. And that opportunity got away from me.
To what do you attribute the missing time then?
Well, to a UFO encounter, to a seeing of something we couldn't identify on Johnson's Point Road here at a particular night. I was in a 68 Volkswagen van with my wife and 5 other people, and we were pulled up to the top of this hill in Johnson Point Road. It's a long hill or long road, really straight with all these steep rises and falls. Got up to the top of this hill, and the Volkswagen van stopped. And we wondered, okay, what's going on? And then it was like the guy who was driving said, "Hey guys, why can't we see the stars?" Now, Johnson Point Road, even today, 50 years later, still is a road that is bound by fir trees that go up a couple hundred feet in some cases, but in average 80 to 150 feet, because they're only like third growth trees. Anyway, but still, you don't normally expect to see any kind of oblique stars, but you should be able to see the stars right over your head on a clear night in the summer. And we looked up and we couldn't see anything. And then the fellow got out a flashlight, and the males of the group, all of us were late teens, except for one guy, early 20s. We got out, stood in front of the Volkswagen van, which refused to start. We had a flashlight that did work. And we were able to shine the flashlight straight up and see a light bounce back off of something. So whatever was up there was at the top of the trees. And then we shone the lights at the top of the trees, and it was good 80 feet up there. It was, of course, dissipated, but you could see the tops of the trees were sitting up there sort of swirling and moving, which didn't make anybody feel too comfortable about what was going on. And then if you squatted down and looked very far oblique out, you could see that about a mile ahead of us, you could actually see the stars again. So this thing that was over us was quite huge. And there's general freak out and so on. And then the thing goes poof and flies off into space, and we all...
Oh, hold it. Losing you there. Okay. Now, okay. So the thing went away.
the thing went away, and we all rushed into town, as I said. And first thing that we did was to hop on a phone and call the radio station and say, basically, UFO, UFO, because we were all excited.
What year?
What's that?
What
70,
year?
That would have been 72.
72. The big UFO wave in the world, actually.
Yeah. And then, as I say, that was early 72. It was a nice spring that year, I think probably March, April. And then by that fall, we get into the situation of missing time. And then the implants were cut out in late 72, early 73.
I always thought that your brain functions, and this is a compliment to you, by the way, no offense, but your brain functions differently than anybody I know. So when you told me of that story, I was not that surprised. Do you think, we have to break the segment once again because I don't want to, if we pass 30 minutes, I don't want the files to get corrupted. But, I have 8 pages of stuff right here. We haven't even been able to touch even one of the things that I wanted to discuss because we're having such a great conversation. But let's take a quick break right now and let's come back and discuss more.
Okay. Let's actually answer some questions then.
Excellent. All right. So let's take a minute and I'll call you right back.
Okay.
All right.
Sounds good.
Bye. All right, welcome back to Veritas. And regarding that incident that you had, I just had a thought. Could it be, when I think of our technology, tin cans that went supposedly to the moon, and if you watch the movie Interstellar, they I don't know if it's a joke that they had, but they confirm in that movie, we never went back to the moon. We just did it so we could bankrupt the Soviet Union. But anyway, from the 1900s till now, we see the Industrial Revolution, and you see the information and technology coming. I can't believe that we're still flying around in tin cans. I still can't believe that we have all this, antiquated technology. Could it be that this, let's call it a breakaway civilization, we are indeed a prison planet, and they have encapsulated planet Earth not to allow, other more advanced civilizations to come and interact with us because of what we discussed earlier. If we find out what the Mayans and what the other, more ancient cultures had, why would we be devoting so much attention and resources and devotion to the established authority when we see that there are other civilizations that have been around for millions of years and have evolved more than us? So we should be listening to them and not to these around here.
It's a good point, and I would agree with you, except I don't actually think it's that easy for other civilizations to come and check us out, other species. Okay, because the space between stars is not a vacuum. It's not that easy to get out of our solar system. In fact, our whole solar system, in a sense, is a prison. They had not gotten Voyagers out of our solar system.
But that's our technology. How about theirs? No, they could use portals.
It doesn't matter about the levels of the technology, because we know from a number of different sources, one of which is the historical records that are kept by the Dogon about the Nummo, as well as some Polynesian records about the Nummo that were kept in the form of carving of stone and shells and stuff. Almost the same identical aquatic beings, just in little dioramas. But in any event, we know that their ability to travel interstellar as physical beings cost them and was undertaken with great care because of the huge amount of energy that was required. So, for instance, you can think of our solar system as a solid mass, and then we're shoving our sun through this solid mass, and this is just one way to think about it. It's an accurate way, but not the only accurate way. But you can think of the sun as being hot because it's the leading edge of this thing that's being shoved through, and there's a lot of friction causing this. And there's actually heliospheres out there. There's bubbles around the sun, a bow wave, if you will. And you don't get a bow wave unless there's something.
Oops. Losing you there.
Let's out
see.
There
Hold on. I'm losing. Let's take a pause. All right. Okay, you're back.
Okay. So as I was saying, obviously they don't like these conversations.
Yes.
Well, there we go again.
I hear you.
Okay. Anyway, so there is a bow wave in front of our solar system. You don't get a bow wave unless there's something to have that wave in. If the oceans didn't exist, but we could float a boat, there wouldn't be any bow wave in front of the ship. It would just float. So we know that interstellar space is not a vacuum. It is more solid than we give credence to. So therefore, the energy required to go zipping about in space, it does not come cheaply. So I can buy certain amounts of the concept. I can accept certain amounts of the concept of traveling beyond space and time, but not in the language discussed as interdimensionally because there are not dimensions as we understand them, as we're being told. A lot of this stuff is basically bullshit. And it's bullshit. They don't know it's bullshit. The people promulgating the theories think that they're doing a good job, but their understanding of reality is such that they have the old remnants of the system, not a complete understanding, and those remnants only allow them to think so far. So there aren't a lot of other civilizations zipping around to come on in. But your point is quite accurate. If there is something greater than the powers that be anywhere, then we can disregard those bastards and their screwy pedophilic debt-sucking ways and just get rid of them because they're an impediment. They're sitting on our shoulders like the jinn, giant blood-sucking, energy-sucking parasites, and we don't need them as a species. We need this network effect. We need to treat each other with a conscious understanding of who we are. And all kinds of things change when you understand you are not your body. For one thing, you can become a great martial artist, okay? As soon as you recognize that or ballet artist or balance artist or anything, because then you decide, I am this doer who is able to command my body to do these things. And the body can just shut the fuck up in terms of its complaints because it's not affecting me, the doer. That our discussion earlier is, you and your thought experiment, and you know now you never age. You are an eternal being. You are as exactly the same I-ness and the same selfness as you were in that very first conducting and the experience at age 11 and now. So you're going to go through the rest of this life not aging, and you're going to go through the rest of your next life not aging. But when you discover that you don't have to think of yourself as an aging body, all different kinds of things open up for you. And a lot of this knowledge is antithetical to the powers that be in their agenda. They want you to think of yourself as a brute, as the flesh, so they can control you. You're the flesh. You can never, ever, ever quit smoking. Okay?
Losing you there? Losing you there? Hold it.
Yep, still here.
Okay, come back.
Okay, so you can never quit smoking. That's their thinking. And so far as it looks, that's quite true. The success rate for people quitting smoking is abysmal relative to any other kind of addiction. The social order is such that until we changed the advertising and got rid of all the support efforts to keep cigarettes going, the addiction rate was steady no matter how many different methods there were to quit. And on an individual level, having smoked for a number of years, I know that you can't quit smoking. However, all you have to do is to change your consciousness and smoking falls away. And truly, that's all you have to do.
What are they replacing smoking with, though? Because it has obviously gone down in the past decade.
Oh, certainly. Yeah. Once the advertising and so forth went away, but then there's been this marvelous explosion in just great stuff for the powers that be that is so much better than smoking ever was. The pharmaceutical industry. Okay, if you're not taking 5 or 6 of these prescription drugs, why, you're not keeping up with the Joneses. You know, you're not as balanced to meds as the Joneses. And so they've got to get you jonesing for everything else. And they make so much more money on psychiatric meds. Bear in mind, the psychiatric meds are being prescribed to you by a scientist that can't define the core of their science. And in fact, look at it this way. Psychiatrists claim to have a science based on behavior studies is what it amounts to, because they can't define what a human is. They can't define consciousness. They can't define the psyche, nor any aspect of it. And they'll never, ever use the word soul because they couldn't define that if they tried. And they think that you are the meat, the flesh, and therefore you will react if they do something to your flesh. That means that they're always stunned when people become breatharians or light eaters or, stab stuff through, doing any of this stuff, right? Because it's outside of their paradigm, because you're supposed to be the flesh. That shouldn't occur. Therefore, these are extra sensory powers. Bullshit. Your senses are the 4 senses in your head, and there are subsystems that do not feel, that simply report information to you, and you can control them as you choose. So, for instance, I got into some stuff the other day, but it now makes sense about remote viewing and how it works from a sensory level, because you are able to see things at a great distance as long as you know how to control your senses on things. But getting back to the idea of consciousness and you can't quit smoking and this kind of a deal, right? They've replaced smoking with the psychiatric industry, and they've got people hooked on all of these drugs, which are ever so much better for them. And they're leading us to wherever they're taking France. In France, they take more psychiatric drugs than anybody on the planet for a lot of
right? I didn't know that.
Yeah. They're the chief. They're number one. We're close behind them on a per capita basis, but not as egregious as the French. It's easier to get. But they also sell them on the whole. I won't go into that anyway. They're jumping on women's psyche in France within the advertising and saying basically you can control your weight and be the ideal French woman just by controlling your flesh through these drugs that supposedly will control your consciousness as well. And they don't really understand the nature of what it is to be human. If you do understand this, then you fall into the category of not believing the bullshit, being able to be what they consider sovereign by simply being able to say, when asked about your residence, you say quite truthfully, I reside here. Now, if you want to ask where this body is at the moment, you'll have to tell me what the fuck address it is.
But that sounds like terrorist talk to me. I mean, to them, not to me. Subversive terrorist talk.
And you can see why it terrorizes them. Okay, because it means I don't accept them as an authority.
Right.
And that is the ultimate terror to them. Someone who stands up and says, no, you're full of bullshit, dude. Ain't going to do it.
They want to be your God. They want to be your God. But speaking of a martial artist, just bringing back the conversation to planet Earth now for a moment. Martial artist, Vladimir Putin. You see what's happening now with the oil prices. Is this manipulation? I mean, we think about Venezuela, Iraq, Iran, Syria. Is this manipulation of oil prices in order to shut down or to minimize Putin? And why I say martial artist, because you know, and I know that he is, but also he's selling this oil with the petrodollar because he has to right now, but he's immediately buying gold.
I know.
What's your take on this?
Isn't it just beautiful?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like there's a particular takedown that is exists in judo. I don't know if it does in jiu-jitsu, but it's basically, well, first off, you have to understand about the type of martial artist that Putin is. He's not a karate guy. He's not taekwondo or Wing Chun or any of these. Okay. He's a judoka.
Judo. Yeah.
Okay. Judo is a grappling art. There's the judo chop. And there's a couple of strikes, but really they don't try and kick. They don't try and punch. They want you to come in close, so it was like, oh my God, when the Ukraine started, I thought, you people are getting suckered, and you can see it all developing because he wants to get them in close. And so they're revealing their weakness, which is actually the oil industry. B, you're quite correct. He's basically selling oil for gold with dollars, with a rising dollar against a suppressed gold price as his lever. And so he's getting more bang for our bucks and our suppression. I say our, I mean the Federal Reserve, getting more gold out of the whole process. And there's this just marvelous side effect here. The fracking industry is just going to shit like a wheelbarrow dumped over a cliff, just heaved over. And they
don't like our talk. That's why they're stopping it. Let's see. Hold on. All right. See, whenever we start getting into these non-mainstream media topics, we get this little flashes. All right, go ahead.
Anyway, so the fracking industry is doomed now because of what they're trying to do to Putin, and they may realize at some level someone's got to be less stupid than they appear and understand what they're doing for him. And yeah, they're falling right in line with his plan. It's a takedown, and we're just walking right into it. The Federal Reserve, et cetera. But I also think at a really cool level in all of this, Putin is aware. Okay, he's not a politician the way we have politicians here. If I went down and talked to my governor of my state, and to be honest, I have no idea what his name is. I'm so outside of local politics. I'm pretty sure he's a Democrat, but beyond that, I don't know. Anyway, but if I were to go on down and talk to him and ask him about chemtrails or any of these subjects, if he has any kind of an inkling of an awareness, it is that it is a proscribed topic and I should be hustled out of there right away. I doubt even that my local governor has that level of awareness about any of these such topics. Putin, on the other hand, does. He knows about HAARP. He knows about chemtrails. He knows about a lot of this stuff because of who his advisors are and how they approach things. So it's all part of a coordinated approach from a judoka. You get your enemy to commit themselves, to come in close, to come in fast. And then you step here, pivot there, grab there. And the next thing you know, your enemy is on the ground and your knees are in his chest.
Let me ask you a question about Edward Snowden. With all the awards this movie is garnering, I have a hard time knowing who's behind the media, that Edward Snowden is who he says he is. Do you think he's a Trojan horse and Putin's playing chess here?
I think Snowden is legitimate because I worked in that subcontracting world, and I've seen nothing in his linguistics about himself that betray knowledge outside of that world. It's been restricted to what I would expect a consultant to say. I've been a subcontractor to government. I know how all of this stuff works. He's sophisticated at a technical level. He's betrayed no knowledge that he's been trained or prepped for a technical role. So you mentioned like Sandy Hook and some of these other put-up jobs. Their language betrays them because the people are not speaking as people from those environments would under those circumstances. They're stepping outside of their linguistic levels too far. And so you see that they're trained. They don't have the support in the background. Snowden talks from a deep understanding of the technology that he was involved in. This is a big key element there. This is one of the ways that I dismiss a lot of the woo-woo guys. You get a lot of these channelers and other whistleblowers, and they do not have the depth of language or knowledge to discuss what's going on in a meaningful fashion. So, they don't know that a CPP is the extension for a C++ file. And you've got to know stuff at a detail level, a trivial level, to have been a programmer. And so Snowden, regardless of whether he's a pawn, he is a pawn. There's no question about that. Or he is at play in a lot of other people's games. There's no question about that. He may be pushed and shifted and so on, but at his core, he's legitimate. So I don't see anything in his language that betrays duplicity on his part. He may be, as I say, a pawn or a stooge, but he's at least an honest one.
Now, another topic, all these provinces that want to break away from their federation, take Ukraine, take Scotland, take Catalonia, where do you think this is going?
Exactly that, into this breakup issue, into the distribution of the social order. You have to understand that this is not a new thing, okay? At the time that the EU was being driven into existence, it's now the European Union. Prior to that, it was the European Community. Prior to that, it was the European cross-border trade agreement. Prior to that, it was this other trade agreement. And prior to that, it was the EC, the European Community for the Settlement of Displaced Persons. That's where it came from, World War II. So here's the thing. I was in Europe in the 60s. I was observant in the 60s, even before the space aliens or whoever the hell had shot me full of those weird BBs, okay? And I was aware at that time that there was a natural movement within the social order of the people around me in the chaos of the 60s, early 60s. So they were still dealing with the remnants of World War II. There were bombs that were being dug up daily in the environs I lived in that had been dropped by who knows who in World War II. And so you had to, if you found them, you carried little flags that were given to you so you could mark them. So if you took these paths through the woods and you saw these flags, you stayed the hell away because you knew there was live ammunition there, or at least the potential. So that close to World War II. But I saw the displaced persons reaction or movement within Europe. And there was a reshuffling that went on that was done in the background by the powers that be, trying to aggregate people and shove them all around. So there were all these people they tried to and actually shoved into Israel. They tried to create all these countries. Iraq was created. Much of the Balkan area was resliced and redivided and everything. Just at that time in reality, when there was a naturally occurring wave, even here in the United States, for dissolution of large-scale operations. We'd had it with the big-scale government from World War II. There was a huge move to separate and distance ourselves from large organizations at that point that was going through the actual human consciousness wave or field, okay? And that was expressing itself in myriad of different ways, which had to be
Hold it. Losing you there. Give it a second.
Mandate.
Hold it. Okay, now you're back.
Okay. In the United States in the 50s, that monotheistic, monothemistic life that was projected out was a direct response to the late 40s, early 50s flourishing of individual and distributed network kind of thing that was undergoing, that this social order was undergoing. And the powers that be were alarmed at that in the 50s. The Beat generation came out and it freaked them out. They started figuring out ways to control that, tried to figure it out. They started television, started putting in the subsidies that allowed the advertising industry to get where it was, and all of these different things as a direct response to this wave that was going through the social order, because they were trying to corral us all into these large organizations. Basically they wanted three, the 1984 kind of Eurasia versus Amerasia. It's whatever, that kind of a deal, right? So it was counter to the way humans wanted to go. So what you're seeing now with these provinces and every group wanting to bust out and get on their own is a direct rejection of the powers that be and their suppression that we've had all these years. Plus, it's the re-emergence of that wave that's been suppressed since then. And that was the point where I was saying that we had that huge amount of suppression actually from the 20s, which was the end of World War I, where we first experienced the rise in Zionism, the stratification of states, the establishment of official borders. If you look at it in the late teens and 20s in the 1900s, you'll find that there were areas in Europe that did not have really official borders. You could wander between Bavaria and Switzerland, not really be sure where you were. All of these kind of things were very loose up until a certain point, and then they came on in and everything started getting more and more rigid so that you got into this element of control. And that was a continuation. But it was at the same time that there was this whole expansion of the human spirit that was ongoing at that time. In the late 20s, early 30s in the United States was the burgeoning of the second or third utopia wave. With all the communes forming, people seeking meaning in non-traditional ways because traditional ways had let them down. We'd had the Depression, we had the World War I, we had the Spanish flu, and during that period of time, people were seeking answers because they weren't getting them from basically the fucktards that were running things.
And isn't it interesting that 1913, 1914, well, after Federal Reserve, then we get World War I, we get the Tax Revenue Act, and we haven't stopped since then. But you're talking about emergence or reemergence. China, I've been saying this since I was in fifth grade. When I had a research project, believe it or not, I said one day in the very near future, China will overtake the United States economy-wise. And people laughed at me. And today, just in the news, I've been saying this for years now, $17.6 trillion economy versus 17.4. Yes, we have less people, but they have overtaken us. The question is, how can we, and we haven't seen this since the times of Ulysses Grant at the end of the 1800s, where do we go from here?
Well, it's kind of a misstatement, in my opinion, of the question, okay? Because the question isn't where do we go from here, because that's actually known just by looking at history. Yeah. The question should be, was the American century an aberrant period? Yeah. And if we look, we find that for the thousands of years prior to that, China was the dominant economy on the planet. Right. When Rome was at its heyday, it was a small province compared to what was going on in China in terms of the amount of volume that was being in terms of wealth that was being generated. When you look at the greatest conquerors that came out of the West, what's his name? The Great? Alexander. He conquers his way through all of the known Western world, goes over through Turkey, the land bridge into Asia, conquers into the Arabian Peninsula. And it's like, this is okay. He conquers into India. And by the time he gets to what we call Persia or Iran, he is totally seduced by having run into a real economy that had real goods and a real functioning everything. And he was basically a barbarian. So our greatest achievers were small-time warlords compared to the real empires that were existent. So why should we, the Yankee traders, who took advantage of a brief period in history when we had the capacity to have millions of mechanized slaves under our control and no one else did through oil, why should we expect that once everybody else has those slaves under them, that China won't go back to its previous status for the previous 6,000 years as the leader of the global economy? To believe otherwise is absurd.
Why aren't the markets reacting yet? I mean, we have the Fed. They stopped the tapering. They stopped the bond purchases.
No, they didn't stop tapering.
Well,
all they did was
the bond purchases. They qualitative.
No, they're still doing it. Yeah, and they're still doing it through Japan.
Proxies.
Well, not even proxies. They're going to trade it back and forth. There's, you hear this concept in the conspiracy community, especially on a religious basis, that everybody wants they're saying the powers that be want a one world currency and a one world government. No, they do not. It was laid out in 1984 in Brave New World, basically, how it's supposed to be. And that is that you must have multiple currencies in order to be able to do an arbitrage between them to suck wealth out of the system undeservedly.
And to fight them too if we have to.
Exactly. And the same thing. So we must have, under their control, from their viewpoint, we must have multiple currencies on the world, at least 3 to play off against each other. And the same thing should be true of the countries of the world. They would be satisfied if we had 3 countries. And then they could suck off as much wealth as they wanted by playing us off against each other at this really stupid monopoly level. So the whole currency thing, all of this business, it has never ended. The QE has never stopped. It's just been shifted over to Japan with the idea that Japan would quickly throw that over to Europe. And Europe is going to have a real problem because the Germans are the driver of the economy there, and they won't go along with it because this German soul, and truly, it is the soul, the template that allows your body to be created, is where we keep and carry with us from life to life to life those past life impressions that guide you to do what you are doing. So your jumping in front of the TV and waving your arms around as a maestro comes from a previous life where that knowledge, you probably were a maestro and practiced and had that so ingrained in your cells that your cells impressed it through the energy body on the astral body, which impressed it on your soul, such that when you reincarnated, the soul naturally, in that expression of joy, finding itself in a material environment again, let that joy out with this cellular memory that it starts to impress on you. This is actually how disease comes into play too, as well. People bring that shit over as well. So undoubtedly, that's what's going on, is this level of impression on things.
About silver and gold. As of today, we have it at 1,208 for gold. In silver, I think your prognosis was that it was going to be higher than this, 1,657.
Yeah, my numbers are terrible on silver in terms of the prices. I mean, I'm just abysmal, guy. It's terrible. We have numbers, and I'm reporting what the data shows, okay? Not what my guess is, because frequently I will say the data shows it's going to be 50 by this particular point. The data still maintains 88.28 by the end of this year. That is by December 31. But I personally can't see how that would occur, right? Between now and then to get to $88 is an absurd idea. Nonetheless, that's the only number that comes through in our data sets. But the value in my work is not the numeracy that we give out occasionally, that we dig around in the data and pull out in our data mining. The value in the work is the other aspect of it. I was absolutely accurate on the November 5th emotional switch on the precious metals. I called that date several days ahead of it in the previous report for that week, and then had discussed that upcoming period for several months before that date actually arrived. So I knew that there would be something that would occur that would cause this emotional response on that particular day, which led to the point where we got the mint selling out millions of ounces of silver in hours instead of months. Okay. So this was that emotional contagion that I had forecast.
What triggered that? The oil prices going down?
No.
Oops. Hold it. Losing you there. Okay, hold it. Okay, you're back.
Okay, so they pushed the silver prices down so far that the silver stackers and the pent-up demand went crazy and said, we've got to get it. We know that they're getting close, because you have to understand the amount of volume that they have to put out in order to suppress the price rises with each attempt. And pretty soon they'll have to push a boulder up a hill in order to basically crush a pebble. And next time they'll have to push 3 boulders. At some point, they can't push it anymore. And so everybody's expecting that some point any day. I was able to peg the emotional waves and the juxtaposition of that emotional wave within reality to come out with some dates of, that were forecast in these IDIR reports, in these immediacy data reports that I've been given. So now we're in a situation where I'm doing an Alta report. That's a written version of these reports. And so I've been getting into the silver and gold issue, but I've been looking at it from a long-term data perspective, because we have 3 data types: immediacy data, short-term, and long-term. Immediacy data is good from 3 days out to about the end of the 3rd week. Short-term is from the end of the 3rd week out to about the end of the 4th month, and long-term is from the end of that 4th month out maybe as much as 19 months, but our error rate is 19 months, so it could be 38 in total. Because a lot of times our long-term data is about a year off in terms of our interpretation. In any event, though, the early edge of that long-term data, where it blends with the short-term data, goes out to about May of this coming year. And we're looking at absolutely incredible conditions that will exist from March through May and beyond. Now, some of those conditions for silver are showing that as we go forward, in terms of the long-term data, we're going to get silver to the point where it is more valuable than the $600 an ounce that I had forecast so many years back, because the value in silver will be multiplied by a shift in the parity rate of silver to gold, which is now in probably the 50s or 60s. It takes about 50 ounces of silver to buy an ounce of gold, more or less, something along those lines, maybe 60, maybe 70. But it should be about 15 to 1, 12 to 1, something like that. But our data is forecasting that we're going to enter a period of time, which may be as early as this May, where the relationship of gold to silver is going to decouple from absolute control. And the beauty of this is that decoupling actually occurs in this January. But on a price level, on a relative value level on silver and gold, the real turmoil doesn't come until May. But then we'll see silver shift down to less than 6 to 1. So
what's causing this? Is it the depreciation of our dollar?
Well, the depreciation of the dollar, no. The dollar is actually inflating. They're inflating the number of dollars, okay? But the ratio of gold and silver is independent of currencies.
Well, that's what I really meant. The value of the dollar keeps going up perception-wise, but we have less purchasing power. Yeah,
correct. Okay. The reason that occurs is because at the moment, all right, let me put it this way. As the social order dies, or the existing system dies and comes under stress, people react in certain ways. And we've seen this throughout history. You can watch it in Rome. You can watch it in any empire that's ever crumbled, how people behave in the last years based on their level of knowledge as to what's going on. And people will try and hide or preserve their assets. And this is why we find in Europe, all throughout in Britain even, you dig down deep enough, you'll find caches of Roman gold. Okay, because these people knew the empire was crumbling. And so they had weird stuff that was gold too. You'd find gold armor, which never would be worn in public, or maybe it would, I don't know, but it would never certainly be worn in battle or anything. They had strange things that were made out of gold. So they obviously lived at a time when they had a surplus such that they could be lavish and come up with these really intricate things as opposed to mere coins. Okay, so it speaks to a certain level of decadence, if you will, of their social order. And they buried this stuff because they wanted to transmit their wealth into the future. And then, of course, they died or whatever, and the wealth stayed buried until we find it. Now we are able to make certain assumptions about this. We're seeing that same kind of thing occur now. We've seen money go into, we've seen currency chase wealth or chase value as it went into collector sneakers and art and cars, collector cars, extreme real estate, all of this kind of stuff. It's a desperate attempt for those who feel, see, sense, or told the empire is dying to get their wealth in a form that they think will transmit time and be useful to them on the other side of whatever is going to emerge when the empire dies. And so this also ultimately will get to the point where people will recognize, oh, all of these things are mere barter goods and I need currency. And then they'll decide, no, I need money. And the difference is currency is something that is used to a transaction between us in real time currently and is paper mostly. But now they're going to say they need money, which is gold and silver. And so that we're going to have this rush into the gold and silver. And the fact of the matter is there's a whole lot of us humans and there is not much above ground gold.
Limited resources.
Exactly. And the gold's been kind of like bagged up by the big organizations and the banks and so on. So the natural turning of this emotional response within humans will focus on silver because there isn't enough platinum or palladium or rhodium or any of the other precious metals to even bother talking about relative as money. And so there is a lot of silver. And so that's what we'll rush in.
Well, losing you there. Let's see.
So
hold it. Okay, you're back now. But is this going to be a domino? What Putin is doing, of course, selling in dollars, the petrodollar, and then immediately buying in gold. Is this going to be a domino around the world?
No, he's actually, they're doing it in a cagey fashion. Okay, they're trying not to drive up the price of gold. They're trying to ride this wave of this increasing value of the dollar. The reason the dollar is increasing is because the Argentine peso, the Thai baht, all of these other currencies are decreasing faster than the dollar. And so people put their wealth into dollars as a temporary haven in search of something else, which is why real estate is going up in certain areas. But no, in my reading of what Putin is doing, he's going to try and push back, keep the dollar price as high as he can, keep the gold price. He's going to try and ride that wave as low as he can, as long as he can, until they just can't get physical anymore. And then they'll simply flip us. Okay. So it's not going to be a domino. There's no click, 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 click effect. This is much more violent than that. If you're not a grappling artist, you have no idea what's going to happen here, because we're going to get thrown over his shoulder and come crashing down, and the air is going to get knocked out of our system. And we'll be flat on our backs, unable to move because we can't breathe.
And earlier this year, you talked about the truth or truther industry, which, by the way, we are part of, right?
Correct. Yeah.
What do you mean by that? Uncovering media lies, keeping the media honest. Isn't this what we do here?
There's going to be a new wave of it here. The data is actually describing an effect that we do not yet have a name for. We've run into this before, where it tries and describes stuff, and we get all these different words because there's no label. It hasn't yet been created. So it was trying to describe, a selfie before selfies existed, and it wouldn't do so well. But we get these kind of amalgams of these words where we're trying to make sense of it. And what is actually going to occur is an actual way to, let's say, monetize somehow the whole truther industry. And that's about as far as I can go in an accurate description. I've got some ideas from the details as to what it amounts to, but it's a very diverse sort of an effect. One of the effects that we know of that is spoken of in this current report that I'm putting out is it looks like there's going to be some kind of a Bitcoin billionaire who's going to do bounties for truth. I don't know if it's Satoshi. I don't know if that's what's going to occur. Now, bear in mind, Satoshi owns like 9% of all the Bitcoins, okay? But the data is suggesting that somebody with a lot of Bitcoins is going to start paying bits for proven truths in a bounty fashion. And it's going to start this whole progression to where people can actually make money and improve.
Hold it.
Their lives.
Hold it there. Okay, let's see if you come back. And you're not coming back. Okay, now you're back.
Yeah, so I only have vague descriptions sometimes because we have yet to label whatever this is. It's not fun. It's not crowdfunding or something like that. It's more like crowd truthing for money or global scavenger hunt for truth for money or something. We just don't have the language for it yet. But that's what I was referring to. That's actually going to pick up in January when the decoupling on the rise in silver really takes off.
What about the sun? And I bring this up. I have a good friend who has been sick since 2009. She was a commercial pilot. She flew citation planes at 50,000 feet. But she told me, quote, "I think I got sick from aerotoxins flying at 51,000 feet in the Citation X. I think I got a kill shot from an X5 flare. That is why I became so interested in the sun." And now she pinpoints a lot of events that happen, volcanoes, earthquakes. She pinpoints a lot of that to solar activity. Where do you see the sun going these days?
Well, it's still moving 72,000 miles per second in the direction it was headed earlier. And we might as well call that north because in space there is no real direction. But let's deviate for a second and say that your pilot friend received radiation levels that even now the airlines admit that if you're a female and you're a fly for a living, pilot or in any other capacity, you're 5 times more likely to get breast cancer. You're 7 more times likely to get ovarian cancer, and it's from the radiation. So your friend should start eating miso for the digestive enzymes that will help purify, and should get into a regimen of systemic enzymes that will help remove those toxins from her body. Because if you look at what's going on now in academic science, even though we acknowledge that individual academics are doofuses, we can get, or doofi, we can get a view of what's happening through the aggregate, right? What is the number one thing in mass that's being investigated by scientific labs all over the planet for profit? It's enzymes, human enzymes, okay? There are more patents pending on enzymes than any other process in the whole body because they're so key. And one of the things that has been discovered is there's several ways now to remove radiation from the body using an enzymatic approach. And so we have serrapeptase and some of the other enzymes that prevent heart attacks by scrubbing out your arteries. You can get that from natto if you can stomach the stuff, or nattokinase, which is the extract. But your pilot friend or anybody exposed to radiation should really look into the idea of doing systemic enzymes as a routine, especially if you're over the age of 27, because the human body stops making them at 27 if you're female. And trickles it down to about 29. Males, they may extend out, depending on your testosterone levels, to about 35. But in any event, from that point on, it's really miserly with them. It hardly ever gets any of them out to you to do any work. And I've had scars that, like I say, from the dogs in the 60s, that since I've been taking enzymes, these scars have now depreciated down to maybe a tenth of what they were in less than a month, and are disappearing. So it's really a very valuable thing, and it helps purify. And if you'll notice, all of the northern hemisphere, but especially North America, is now being bathed in a new blanket of radiation. And it's coming from the twin problems of Fukushima and Ukraine, the new Ukraine disaster, which will magnify and get larger, by the way, according to our data sets. So anyway, getting all this back to the sun, that we're in this period of time when the sun has reached the confluence of multiple streams of matter through which it must push. Okay, so this is why this area of space is different. Space is not ubiquitous. It is not ubiquitously dense. We're in a more dense area of space now, so our sun is getting hotter as it's pushing through this stuff. Plus, the matter that we're pushing through has currents. And so our sun is having to react to those currents as it goes through. And so the sun is outputting more because of the friction, we'll just call it that, as it shoves through this denser region of space. There are certain effects of this that can be expected. The coma behind the sun, because in the universe, there is only one model for every subtype. And so all solar systems, galaxies, planets, everything are basically comets. Okay, so the comet that is our sun, its coma is going to get bigger and longer, and the center of effort, if you will, or its center of lateral resistance, if you were a sailor, will shift aft, further back. This is what's happening to Earth. We're actually shifting away from the sun, and that's going to precipitate this next ice age. It's not as dramatic or as terrible as we might think, because even though we're shifting back, we're going to expand and grow larger. So it'll make it tougher for things like giraffes and elephants to live, and it may put pressure on whales, but it shouldn't be too bad for humans at our current size. But any of the genetics that are left over from the giant era, those individuals may really suffer.
Are you saying the gravitational pull will increase? In other words, we're going to be way more?
Correct. Exactly so. Numerically so. But it's going to be very unstable, very wildly variant for a number of decades, maybe even centuries, as it gets into this next stage. This stuff does take time. Although the majority of the expansion may happen in a very brief period of time. If we look at things like the Laurentian ice sheet that used to cover Canada, all those miles thick and everything, it shifted in a very brief period of time. And that brief period of time could be zeroed down to basically a week. And you could say, well, it took, 11,000 years for this ice mass to move. True. But 90% of that activity for that movement occurred in this particular year of those 11,000 years, or this particular decade, or whatever. This 90% rule is mostly true. And that is that within that particular month or year, there was a day where there was that trigger event that was the most activity that started the whole thing. And from that point on, the destiny of the action was irreversible, if it makes sense. So we're in that period of time now relative to Earth. It's going to expand, and its destiny as an expanding planet will cross a threshold, which should actually intrude on our consciousness. And everybody should be able to say, once we pass that point, hey, Earth's bigger. Oh, look over there, the Earth's bigger.
And by the way, Fukushima for a moment, we think of Fukushima being in the northern hemisphere and that it should be affecting only the northern hemisphere. But I have a good friend who lives in Ecuador. And he reported to me that the levels of radiation hitting Ecuador are off the chart. So how is that possible going to the southern hemisphere?
It has to do with the the counter polarity of the jet streams and what's happening with the radiation. As I mentioned earlier, we have the sun, getting back to the sun, we have all this intrusion in our ionosphere and our magnetosphere of bombardment of these extra particles from the sun, because the sun is much more energetic than it would have been in the past, because it's now pushing through a lot more material. So it's got to be more robust and push through harder, and it puts out more pollution, if you will, more extra energy. And so the burn is bigger, so we're getting more of that stuff. And so all of this is occurring. The Earth is getting bigger. The energies are making the atmosphere unstable. So basically, you can say right now that as a young man with a projection of living, say, another 30 or 40 years of a natural lifespan, while maintaining your body machine, one thing that you'll be able to count on throughout the rest of your life, besides the word change, is going to be the word instability. Okay? It's going to be an unstable environment no matter where you look, as we grapple through all of these various things that are all happening at once.
Is this happening for humans? Are we living now no longer in a stable environment?
Yes, that's gone. And it's also no longer neutral, because we've got these, it used to be neutral towards positive because there were always humans around. We would have problems, but, we would always recover and keep going. But now we're in a situation where other humans are making our environment neutral, slightly negative. Okay, it's not really neutral anymore. It's more towards the negative side, because they're pumping out the chemtrails, the electromagnetic pollution, and all this other stuff that is not only harming us, but something they don't get, or if they do get, that would be really a staggering thought, and I'll have to consider that. But there's something that they may not grasp, and that is that all of the things they are doing to try and manipulate us are not only going to cause reactions to and within us, but the universe as a whole is experiencing those things and is responding. So we set off a nuclear bomb, and we say we're going to use this as a bomb to destroy Japan. And we're ignorant and unaware that there are vibration levels that at the time we ignited that bomb that shatter parts of universe, in our thinking, bazillions of light years away. Okay. We're unaware of the propagation of these energies because we are stupid, and we think that the energy range are what we can see within our senses or perceive within our machines.
The kids found the matches.
Exactly. And we can't see flame is our problem. Okay. That's really what's going on. We can feel the heat out of the match, but we can't see the flame in this metaphor. And so we don't see the flame propagating and setting parts of universe on fire. This is what draws the negative energy of universe to us, is setting off all these nuclear bombs, 2,000 or 3,000 of the things in our atmosphere since the 40s. And this has precipitated all of these problems. And, you get all the ideas of the Philadelphia experiment and everything being tied into these nuclear explosions and so on. And it may not be that far-fetched at this particular level, but in any event, what the powers that be fail to recognize or fail to understand, or are going to do in spite of an understanding of it, is that the universe responds to that. Okay. The universe as a whole, materium, is a self-correcting machine. So think of us as an Isuzu Trooper. Okay. Short wheelbase. We're cruising down the road. We're doing really good. We've got a well-tuned 6-cylinder engine, but in this Isuzu Trooper, we've got our engine. It's smart. Okay. It's got so many damn sensors in there. It's got more sensors than we have nerves in our body. So it knows when the oil's a little hotter over here than it is over there, and it can do things to correct all of this sort of thing. And so it's cruising along just fine. And then you get some guy at a gas station who deliberately puts in gasoline that's got little bubbles or something, or bad bursts of it, okay? It hits our Isuzu engine. It burns that gasoline, but the Isuzu engine is smart enough to know shit ain't right, and it has to respond. Now, it may or may not be consciously aware of itself as an Isuzu engine, but that's immaterial. As a universe, which is our Isuzu engine pulling us through our mythical road here, universe is coming back, and it may not be conscious of itself as universe, but it knows shit ain't right here on Earthville, and it's doing things to correct that through the sun, through the currents in the space that the sun has to go through, that will cause these effects, that will get rid of some of the shit that's coming out of Earth that's setting other parts of the universe on fire.
It creates order.
We can't perceive.
It creates order out of the chaos. But you mentioned chemtrails.
No. We've got to be real careful there. That's a meme that is propagated by the Masons. That's a remnant of the understanding. It creates chaos out of order. Chaos is what is good. Distribution of effort, plethora of life forms, ensures success of life.
Fibonacci sequence everywhere.
Correct. And the idea of monoculture equals death. If you put, I couldn't get myself more than 5 minutes into that Interstellar movie. Okay. I'm not into thematic feeling movies because I didn't want it to be put into that
Silent
brain, that feeling brain. Okay. But I grasped that there was a Dust Bowl depression-y kind of thing going on, and we'd all somehow put all of our energy into a single monoculture crop of corn or whatever. And so it was like, oh, they're recreating the hive model where we're monoculturalists. I know universe won't allow that because that dooms the species, and it wants us to survive. It is necessary that beings with souls that are on the path of permanent, positive, progressive advancement, not evolution, but advancement, must exist for reasons of the materium itself. So basically, our Isuzu engine here is saying, our smart little truck engine is saying, no, this shit ain't going to happen on my watch. And it's doing things at levels that the powers that be are trying to combat. And so they're sort of like the mole in whack-a-mole, and they don't know that their heads are popping up and universe is whacking them. They're just responding to the pain in the head occasionally. Okay, and trying to do things to eliminate the pain in the head without realizing that they put themselves into that machine that is causing this whole process. But at some point, universe is just going to get all the hammers all at once.
I forgot to ask you about chemtrails. I mean, we've talked about this for years. Has your perspective changed into what they are and what the purpose is?
The purpose goes back to the why. Okay, and I can see so many purposes and have had so many people state so many purposes. On a personal level, I know that they are a blockage at a core level, okay? You're talking about like the Common Core stuff. The language there in Common Core I found very revealing because of what they were trying to do. It actually focuses on their end game. So specifically, it's weird that they're revealing it that way. But if we look at the language of what is central to chemtrails, and we look at it at a base examination level, then we can say that chemtrails are not illuminating. They're not enlivening. They're not dissipative. They are blockage at some level. Okay. So they are going to a blockage that you could say, okay, sure, HARP maybe uses them to bounce waves off of. Maybe somebody's using them to prevent the space warfare going on outside of Earth to see what's going on down below Earth. And in fact, there was this weird science fiction book. Let me see if I can think about I can't think of the name of it because I read so many of them as a kid, but that was one of the premises that they used in that book from the 50s or 60s or 70s. And the idea was that Earth had been bombarded by these elephant-like beings from space who just shoved rocks down to cause megalithic explosion kind of things on us. And we were really in a world of hurt. And so what we did was we put up fogs so they couldn't see what we were doing in our cities. And so they wouldn't know where to throw these rocks. And it worked. It was just part of this whole larger plot. So there is some justification for that idea. There's historical records. There's over 900 patents on various forms of chemtrails. Chemtrails are evolving. There's now some component of lasers involved, so it's energetic. So I believe that there is probably more than one agenda there. And to focus on the why of it, I think is missing for us, the impact in the immediacy level. Okay. So for me, my focus now is surviving the chemtrails because I now know that they're a negative component of my environment I must deal with. They cause me to lose at least 2 days a month to sinus headaches. There's the aluminum component that I'm trying to deal with the enzymes and other methods of flushing it out. And to a certain extent, since I can't stop it, the why they're doing it and the how of it are slightly less concerns. Make sense?
Yes.
The how is an issue, and I follow how they change, but I can't affect it. And the powers that be have decided that they will hear none of it to the point of killing chemtrail activists. So it's a very negative thing for them, but somehow very necessary. And that being the case, I don't see them stopping until we get to this huge level of crash to where they can't be economically supported. Now, there is a really curious component of it that if you look at what Catherine Austin Fitts talks about, the cost of the breakaway civilization, how, it might cost $40 trillion to make the craft that was the Phoenix Lights. Well, what does it cost every day to put chemtrails up? That is sucking money, resources, something every single day at a huge level, just in the kerosene to power the airplanes or whatever it is that they use to power them, right? Even if they say they've got some new kind of free energy device, you still have the people, you still have chemicals they got to put out there. They've still got the hours. They're going to be paid overtime, maybe. There's the birthday parties at the organization, all of these hidden costs. And then there's the paperwork to make sure it gets done on time and, the sick days, all of that kind of thing.
And they don't spray on holidays, I've noticed.
And also, they're not spraying everywhere, There are places you can actually move that you don't get chemtrail spray. And you find people in those regions say, what are you talking about? Because they may not very often get into the areas that you have chemtrails, and they may not recognize them as other than clouds. But that being the case, since we know it's not global, but we know it is in our reality that these people are paying a huge cost, I've estimated that on one day, 2 summers ago, when I was coming up on a train or 3 summers ago from Portland to Olympia, seeing the non-activity outside of Portland in the valleys of Kelso and Longview in that area. And then once again, getting back into it in Puget Sound and watching the planes and stuff and just counting them, I figured it was probably costing about $9,000 an hour in kerosene to run the planes that I had seen in Portland and in Puget Sound. And that's just a crude estimate. So we may be talking, truly trillions of dollars. And so you have to factor all of this stuff in when you're talking about our economy these days. So the chemtrails are part of the economy and part of our economic woes because we've got to support those. So no wonder our empire is dying. Even if the breakaway civilization is going to thrive, there's a transition period where they're sucking the resources out of the otherwise or used to be great American empire.
I told you I have a brother who's a executive at a major airline, and he says that there are 2 questions that if you work in the airline industry, you are not supposed to ask or you may lose your job. Number 1, why crash at the Pentagon? And what are chemtrails? So those 2 things. Now, we only have a couple of minutes left because I don't want the file to reach an hour and then maybe drop the file. But what's on your radar for next year? What's on top of your list?
The events of March through May and the burgeoning renaissance that's occurring underneath our feet. We're going to go through some really horrific times as the dollar and debt-based, currency-based empires die around the planet. But at the same time, there's going to just be a huge renaissance that's just going to change everybody's lives. So if you think your lives are different now than they were 15 years ago, just wait a few years, wait even 5 years, and you'll say, boy, what has occurred now? It's truly going to be amazing because of the magnification effect that you get with network effect. So the free energy device, the guy comes up with this little thing for, powering a very high-powered halogen bulb that I'm going to make into my running rigging or my standing lights and all of this kind of stuff. And I'm going to show other people how to do it. Next thing you know, we've got these out all over the place and
Open
we're no longer
source.
using. Exactly. And it's self-magnifying, and somebody else is going to figure out some way to make them even more powerful, as you say, make an engine out of them, get more juice out of them, and there you go. So 3 years from now, maybe there's no more grid intertie anywhere, that kind of thing.
Well, Clif High, once again, thank you so much for being part of the show, especially this very special season premiere, season 7 for Veritas. I cannot believe that we've been around for so long. I never thought that we could last more than a month. So with people like you, I thank you for being part of the show and being such a good friend. So, from the bottom of my heart, thank you very much.
Sure, no problem, Mel, and may you have 7 more all on video and kick ass.
Thank you very much. Take care and Merry Christmas, whatever you celebrate, and a very healthy, Happy New Year.
Okay, and thank you very much.
You too.
Got to feed the dogs now.
You bet. Take care.
Okay, bye.
Bye.